If we then go to the agenda of the meeting, you will see that there is a short welcome introduction, which is what I'm doing now. And then we will go into a round table that will focus on unlocking demand, barriers and incentives. We will hear best practices and lessons learned in 2 sessions with a short break in between. And then we will have an open discussion and an identification, hopefully, of actions that we can take going forward before we close. So by way of introduction, well, my name is Robert Nij. I am working here in DG Energy as the head of unit responsible for energy efficiency of buildings and products. So that's the unit that is responsible for the implementation of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, and on the other hand, on eco-design and energy labeling policies. I want to start really with a sort of a scene setter. What you see here is a sort of a modern version of the story of the wolf and the 3 little pigs. And what this really illustrates is how our policy action for decarbonized and flexibility of buildings comes to the fore, and is really a good introduction to the broader context for this workshop. Really about being smart, prepared, rational, far-sighted, and even if those efforts to protect ourselves are more costly or more cumbersome upfront, it does pay off in the long term. And I mean, everybody knows this story, of course, but it's clear that when we build and renovate buildings that are in the A class under the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, we really protect ourselves not only from being cold in the winter, or being overly warm in the summer, which we are currently facing in a heat wave that is touching many parts of Europe. But we are also shielding ourselves from volatility in the energy prices, and we are reducing our energy bills in the long run. I mean, as you know, about 40% of all energy used in the European Union is used in buildings. And more or less 36% of the EU's natural gas consumption and imports in 24 is used in buildings. And if we also count the gas used that for generating electricity that's used in our building stock, the share goes up to around 50%. And we believe that there are also, of course, broader consequences of efficient and flexible buildings that we should look at. And those are, for example, system level benefits, such as avoidance of grid costs. We estimate that smarter electricity use and demand shifting away from peak hours in buildings can avoid up to 35% of future electricity grid expansion costs. And at the same time, it contributes to mitigating grid congestion. We see already in countries like the Netherlands that the grid is blocked and we can no longer connect, for example, buildings and new buildings to the grid. So building retrofits decrease peak energy demand, resulting in a potential distribution of grid investment savings of around 45 billion euros and an immediate 75% reduction in transmission grid congestion. So we also see broader benefits there. This picture, therefore, is a reminder that buildings and their energy performance are key for several political and practical priorities for the EU. The affordability for households and companies as energy consumers, the resilience of our energy system, the competitiveness of our economies, the strategic autonomy of our continent, climate impact, and last but not least, the health, safety, comfort, and well-being of all of us as users of the buildings we live, study, or work in. And the recent conflict in the Middle East has again brought this message home. I mean, the additional fossil fuel import costs are estimated at more than 50 billion since the start of the conflict. And that is just to keep importing the same amount of energy that we have done beforehand. And what has This has resulted in many member states committing billions of euros also in fiscal measures to support consumers in their countries, despite a very tight fiscal situation in most member states. So if you then look back at history, we see that fossil fuel shocks are not exemptions or exceptions, but actually have become increasingly the rule. And so instead of paying for crisis and paying for imported energy, we can also invest that money in preventing the impact of those shocks. And we believe that renovation of the existing building stock and flexibility are really structural investments that reduce the need for the next bailout and bring immediate benefits to consumers. There is, of course, work to be done. Renovation rates, unfortunately, maintain stubbornly low, despite the fact that we have all the technologies available. And also the role of buildings as an asset in the electricity system remains underdeveloped. And that is, of course, what we are talking about today. Fortunately, we have quite a lot of good examples already in place, and we will hear about those examples, or some of those examples already today. But what is needed is an acceleration and a scaling up of the implementation of such examples. And this is where the Better Homes partnerships come in. It's an initiative that the Commission announced under the European Affordable Housing Plan, which we published at the end of last year and reiterated in the Citizens' Energy Package, which came earlier this year. And what this Better Homes partnerships really aims at is to scale up existing market solutions for the renovation of homes or buildings or residential buildings in the first instance. What we are of course hoping to achieve is that we as Commission can use our convening power to bring stakeholders together, stakeholders that are already working on solutions on the ground, and in the hope that our role can be to accelerate and scale up those projects. We have identified 4 key focus areas for the Better Homes partnerships. On the one hand, there is demand-side flexibility from buildings, the topic of today's workshop. We are looking at how we can stimulate and simplify renovations. We will also focus on financing and financing instruments, in particular through the Energy Efficiency Financing Coalition that we've established a few years ago, and where we have brought together member states on the one hand and the financial sector on the other hand, and recently have also brought industry players on board. And then finally on efficient heating and cooling solutions. One thing that is of course an important focus is that electrification, and electrification is something we are of course very, very keen to push. The Commission will soon come out with an electrification action plan, but we are seeing that this is also increasing grid pressure, and therefore we believe very strongly that buildings can be part of the solution. And we see here indeed system trends such as electrification, more renewables, EVs, heat pumps coming to the system. We still need to focus on decarbonization and of course also of security of supply. And we have grid impacts such as higher peak electricity demand, congestion, and also mismatch between renewable generation and consumption. I mean, these are of course not new, and you are very familiar with what is currently happening in the energy system. Of course, we have already a quite extensive policy framework in place for demand-side flexibility, for example, through the electricity market design, and we are preparing new initiatives. I mentioned the Electrification Action Plan, but we're also working on a new network code on demand response. And here you see a number of elements that we are currently already working on. One important element here is to make data exchange between the different parts of the energy system for demand-side flexibility and to improve that data exchange, in particular to facilitate automation of demand response. And there's quite a lot of work ongoing in that area, in particular the recommendations developed by energy and e-mobility experts on data exchange for demand-side flexibility and smart and bidirectional charging. But we have also put in place a code of conduct for EU smart energy appliances. Now, this is of course all nice, but what is super important from our perspective is the actual implementation of all of these initiatives on the ground. So in this workshop, we will not really focus on these ongoing initiatives, I would say, but really very much focus on concrete examples from across the EU on how this could be practically implemented. And the goals of this workshop tie into that. The aim is very much to focus and to learn from practical examples, to identify barriers on the ground, and to look at actions that can be taken both from our side in supporting stakeholders, but also by stakeholders themselves. The aim is also to see whether the discussion today can identify projects that would be scalable and would fit in the context of the Better Homes partnerships. That brings me to the end of my short introduction, and I'm very pleased that we have John Ferris with us from LCP Delta, who will moderate the roundtable on barriers and incentives in this area. John, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Robert, for an interesting introduction and the invitation to moderate this first session. As you say, my name's John Ferris, and I've spent the last 20 years working in flexibility from consumers and the buildings that we live and work in. There has been a lot of progress in that time, not least the growth in renewable generation, but also in technology with new flexible assets and also increased connectivity of old appliances and devices. Markets have developed with improving access to ancillary services, wholesale markets, and also the development of local markets. And as you point out, Robert, the involvement or the introduction of flexibility into the regulations, not least from the Clean Energy Package to the Network Code on Demand Response, has grown over that time. But it's been maybe the crises that we've seen, whether COVID, the invasion of Ukraine, closure of Hormuz, that's pushed consumer awareness of flexibility and the benefits. And as temperatures reach 40 degrees across Europe today, we may realise that progress has been too slow, and the crisis that's creeping up on us is maybe the one that we should be paying more attention to. Flexibility brings a lot of benefits to the energy system, but is still somewhat seen as a last resort. Flexibility from consumers and buildings supports renewable integration and helps to balance the system. It can do so in parts of the grid that large batteries connected to the transmission system can't reach. You can reduce peak demand both locally and nationally and manage congestion with local flexibility. You can get quicker connections by increasing hosting capacity, not only by using flexibility to reduce the need for capacity reinforcement when grids are tight, but also by making much better use of the spare capacity that we have on our networks. And all of this put together reduces the costs for everyone, both from reinforcement of the network and investment in generation. If we move to the next slide, the assets that consumers and their buildings can provide flexibility with has changed in the last 20 years. We've seen the growth of solar generation on people's roofs, bringing generation to the low voltage network, not just from the transmission grid. The development in batteries, both in EVs and at domestic level, has also changed the capacity for consumers to provide flexibility. But on a day like today, heating and cooling and the potential for flexibility within our buildings is an aspect that's maybe not developed quite as quickly as the more visible assets and the flexibility from batteries. And it's not just the new assets. We mustn't forget the increased controllability of existing assets in people's homes, whether it's dishwashers, washing machines, or water heaters. And moving on to the value that consumers can get from flexibility. This can be incentivized from tariffs, from their retailers. To date, that's mainly been based around the wholesale price, but increasingly we're starting to look at using incentives in tariffs from networks. Access to markets has improved, but still for consumer assets is somewhat restricted and limited. And the growth of energy communities has also been quite slow, but the benefits of matching locally between demand and generation has never been stronger. And moving on to the next slide, we still see a lot of barriers to residential flexibility. And to me, a lot of these are barriers of coordination. We need to integrate assets into the network and coordinate the network needs and the use of the assets. Even within the home, interoperability between different types of assets make it difficult to coordinate within each home and between homes. We looked at the different types of markets, whether tariffs, markets and communities. We still see a lack of coordination between them, but perhaps most of all, it's coordination of consumers, of people who are asking to change their behavior that's most important to bring flexibility into the mass market. So moving on to the next slide, we are going to start the round table, and it's with great pleasure that I will introduce first Margriet de Groot from the province of Utrecht. And Margriet, I think it's fair to say that you're really at the front line of dealing with grid congestion. Can you tell us about the impact it's had, not just on the energy system, but the societal impact that you're facing and having to deal with?
Yes, of course. Good morning, everybody. I work for the province of Utrecht, and actually we've been facing grid congestion problems since 2022 by now. And this meant that mainly companies couldn't get connected anymore. But it had a large impact on our housing projects, because obviously you also need large connections to create larger housing projects as well. So it has an impact on housing, it has impact on getting our transportation sector more sustainable. It has impact on our economy, because the climate for companies to actually get to our region gets more difficult. And obviously our energy transition ambitions are very well under high pressure, because companies can't move on with their plans anymore.
Thank you, Margriet. If I could then introduce Yvonne Roeder from the DSO entity. Is this something that you're seeing across Europe with the organisations that you represent? Is Yvonne here?
Here. I didn't hear the question. No, I had some bad contact, I think. I'm sorry.
So the issues that Margriet is dealing with in the province of Utrecht on dealing with grid congestion, is that something that we're seeing across the rest of Europe? Is Utrecht particularly at the forefront of dealing with the issues? And how are other parts of Europe addressing this issue?
I think for residential connections, I think it's a very special situation in the Netherlands, and it's not the same in all Europe, fortunately. But we are dealing with congestion issues. It's mostly about big connections, larger connections, or sometimes production. So congestion issues and what is issues is something that DSOs are concerned about for the future. and we are preparing for being able to handle these questions for the future very much. So that's also why we are preparing new regulation. Network code for demand response is one of the regulation that will help us with some of the barriers you mentioned here, the one on coordination and market design. I would actually mention market design because it's really important to use the energy system efficient, that we also have market designs in respective member state that actually sees so that we will be efficient when we are looking at how you use flexibility for different purposes. Using flexibility for grid issues, congestion and wattage issues, that's one purpose, but you also are using flexibility towards electricity prices and also towards balancing issues. So it's really important that we have a functioning market design to be efficient and use the flexibility in the best way. And one part of this coordination is actually when should you use the flexibility within the building, for example, to have a efficient connection, so you don't have a bigger connection than you need, and when are you supposed to use the flexibility for different kind of system needs. And I think here it's perhaps not something we will decide in regulation, but we have to understand this issue so that we really use existing resources and existing flexibility and future flexibility in the best way.
Thank you, Yvonne. And I gather we are either approaching or have reached the 5th anniversary of the DSO entity. Is that correct? Yvonne, you're on mute.
Yes, they are celebrating a lot with digitalization.
Thank you, Yvonne. So if I could then introduce Delphine Fevre from...
in the best way. And it's really something...
Yvonne, your audio is cutting out for me. So if I could introduce Delphine from Elax Energy as a representative of a company that's actually been working with consumers to bring flexibility from buildings into the market.
Yeah, essentially. So nice to meet you. My name is Delphine Fevre. I'm Chief of Staff at Elax Energy. And so we're a French scale-up transforming social housing units into virtual power plants. And so we're already deployed across more than 75,000 homes. And I mean, as you mentioned, our approach is quite unique. So we don't ask tenants to bear the cost or buy expensive new systems. We actually retrofit the standard water heaters they already have and make it smart thanks to our thermostat. And so this enables lower bills for tenants and flexibility for the grid as we participate to markets including wholesale, balancing capacity, as well as fast reserve and AFRR. And so we are here to essentially prove that demand-side flexibility can be both inclusive as well as seamless and deployed at scale starting today.
And Yvonne mentioned that the need to coordinate the incentives and the signals coming from the markets for the system needs at different levels and also within the homes. In theory, that seems fine, but in practice, how are you finding the ability to respond to the signals to participate in the different markets in order to deliver value for your customers?
I think in France, we work very closely with the TSO and DSO. And so our solution piloting is quite automated technically. And so, of course, there's always some issues technically, but I'd say that today the main bottleneck is regulatory, not really technical. I think we're currently suffering from, what I call a retrofit blind spot, which is essentially why policies focus heavily on subsidizing, new equipment, like EV batteries, and so forth and so on. They ignore kind of Europe's largest untapped resource, which is the existing installed base. And if you look at France, we have 15 million standard electric water heaters. They consume 25 terawatt-hour annually, so that's 5% of our entire national electricity demand, locked behind static, 40-year-old timers. And I think that upgrading what is already in people's homes is kind of the most cost-efficient path to grid efficiency without penalizing, affordable housing. But to unlock this hidden giant, we have to fight, indeed, administrative friction around consumer consent, because, requiring an explicit individual opt-in for low-impact household assets is a scalability killer at the end of the day. And so we must switch to a default opt-out model, which is already socially acceptable when you look at the data across our 75,000 active assets. The customer refusal rate is almost non-existent. And I think that when comfort is fully guaranteed within the home, consumers don't just accept flexibility, they kind of completely forget about it. And so essentially, I think the citizens are ready, the tech is ready. The only thing missing today is the regulation.
Thank you, Delphine. I don't think that'll be the last time we cover the topic of consumer engagement and consent in this discussion. So finally, moving to the Nordics. Also very interested in the topic of heating and cooling in buildings, but taking a different approach is Harald Svensson from E.ON. Harald, you're looking a lot of the time beyond individual buildings and how district heating can play a role in providing flexibility. Can you talk a little bit about some of the projects that you've worked on there and how you're integrating the district heating in parallel with the electrification of buildings?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Exactly, we will be hearing about one of those projects later on with my colleague Peder when it comes to combining different energy sources and using the flexibility within a larger system perspective, which we will hear later on in the Be Flexible pilot. And another example is close to Margriet. We have trying to use like sharing of heating and power. We have a ectogrid solution there where several connected heat pumps provide heating that is balanced in a thermal balance storage system. So we try to see the energy system as from a larger perspective, and connecting to what Delphine said earlier. Using existing assets, using the thermal inertia of the whole buildings, and seeing them as an asset could be a potential moving forward, in not just using the electricity grids from a flexibility perspective, but also using other energy sources in combination.
And you mentioned the topic of thermal inertia. I'm sitting here in the UK, where buildings have traditionally been built to keep heat in the winter. What's the importance? What's the value of retrofitting, not just for the assets and flexibility, but also for more efficient buildings? Are there things that we can learn from the building designs and the codes across Europe?
I believe so. I think we can learn already from existing, knowledge sharing between the countries, as you alluded to, but also between our different companies working on the topic of energy. We all have different experiences from how to solve different topics that the customer issues, etc. And I think sharing information between each other in an open and transparent way could help us move forward as well.
Thank you, Harold. I can see that 2 participants have raised their hands, but I can't see who. I believe, Yvonne, you've raised your hand. So would you like to come in at that point?
I actually raised my hand, John, to add on the topic that Harold said, because it might be interesting to point to the project that we did in the Netherlands, where we have created our first group contract for residual houses and the collective assets that were needed for building the Merwede Canal project. It's one of the biggest developments in Utrecht that we faced that couldn't be built anymore. But well, when there's a crisis, there's also a lot of creativity, and we to challenge the builders to create the whole project within the actual how should I say it, within the grid capacity that we actually only had for the houses. So they redesigned the project and made the houses very less demanding. So we actually managed to bring back the electricity demand of the houses to 1/3 of the amount we normally have to reckon with. And there was a lot of flexibility created in the project, and also working with batteries, with energy storage, with collective energy. And for us, that's a very good example of how it can be done. And eventually we used this example to create new policies to see if we could develop regulation to make sure that in the future all projects will be developed this way. So maybe that's enough for now, because I can't go into all the details. But for us, the main learning was that it's really possible to create a project like this, and that would be that is a good basis also to see how can we get it into national regulation, even that all future houses should really demand a lower level of electricity.
So these projects seem to be the exception rather than the norm in response to a crisis. I'm wondering.
It's the challenge right now. Yes.
It is a challenge, and one that we're seeing more broadly, but maybe more in Utrecht or earlier in Utrecht than in other areas. I'm just wondering what are the barriers to actually making this happen more widely? How can we bring these approaches before we get to a crisis point, rather than waiting until it's absolutely necessary?
There are a few barriers, I think. One is in the regulation. A lot of innovation that needs to be done isn't just in the technology; it's also in the contracts that we create together. Because, for example, energy sharing isn't allowed in the way that's not everywhere yet, and in the way that we actually need it to build good business case. Consumer protection is obviously very important, but it's sometimes also blocking the way that project developers can actually create a good business concept. And then I don't think it's a good solution to get rid of this consumer development, but maybe we should think about the cost allocation in these type of projects as well, because especially when you look at grid congestion, the societal impact and costs are very high. But if we look at the solutions, we actually look at the market players, the builders, to solve the issue and also to come up with the financing constructions. So we should maybe also look into the cost allocation question if you look at a big barrier.
Thank you, Marguerite. And I suspect both Delphine and Harold may want to come in on these points, working as you do with landlords and builders looking to develop these solutions. Delphine.
Yeah, definitely. I think Margaret is raising, a vital equity issue here, which is when grid reinforcement costs are blindly socialized. Lower income citizens bear a disproportionate financial burden for a grid crisis they actually didn't cause. And so if we want efficient market functionality, I think our cost allocation frameworks indeed must shift from financing physical grid expansion to rewarding avoided green investments. But there's kind of critical policy catch there, which is that local flexibility markets cannot just be a playground for energy prosumers with premium assets. They must be structurally designed to include low-cost mass market residential loads. And I think that resolving the societal cost of congestion means ensuring that affordable housing can actively participate in and be rewarded by the flexibility market. So I mentioned something like the default opt-out consent, but there's many other streams we could explore. I think that's the main one for us, at least, working with social landlords day to day. But I think that inclusivity is quite key on this topic.
And in terms of actually supporting that inclusivity, is that a technology issue? Is it a regulation issue? Is it around the market rules? What can be done to improve that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mix. It's so, as mentioned, a regulatory issue. And consent is one part, and then we can also talk about how we measure flexibility, and so that's kind of submetering, how we allow multi-aggregation and that supply split, and so forth and so on. So I mean, regulatory, is one side of things. So in this context, Europe must solve kind of two distinct market architecture bottlenecks, which is first, so how you measure flexibility, that's submetering, and I think we have the EMD directive deadline next month. And so, yeah, regulators must accept essentially certified device level data to give DSOs trusted observability. And then second, who manages it, which is multi-aggregation. And I think the upcoming network code must guarantee that independent aggregators can access home assets without being blocked by legacy suppliers. And I think that Belgium's supply split, the UK's meta splitting mechanism prove this is operationally viable. And so submetering gives the DSO the trusted data, multi-aggregation gives the consumer the market choice. And I think we need both. So that's regulatory. But then you also need to engage with the customer. And I think that essentially, let's be honest, I think nobody wakes up wanting to balance the power system. I think most end consumers do not care about the grid, and they shouldn't have to. And so to us, I think it's really important to highlight that flexibility is the means, not the end. And so at Elax Energy, for instance, we do believe that flexibility revenues are here to fund what users actually care about, which is lower bills, extended asset lifespan, limescale prevention, and predictive maintenance. I think that when you sell tangible, high-value services users do care about, rather than the grid tech, mass adoption follows. So I think there's also kind of this cultural shift to operate, and that's on kind of the utilities, flexibility operator, to try to sell a service that actually is high value for the user, and to build trust locally. I think working with social landlords, making it invisible in the home is a technical task. Getting people to let you install it in the first place requires trust, and so we don't build trust through solely a digital app. You also build it underground. And so we partner, for instance, directly with building caretakers to train them to be also our project ambassadors. And I think that this trusted local proximity is exactly how we achieve, massive adoption on our very first site visits. And to get consumer on board, you must engage the whole human ecosystem. They already trust. So I don't want to be too long. I think Harold has also a lot of ideas on this topic, but I think it's a kind of a mix answer.
Yeah, and when you talk about the value to consumers, is that proximity that helps you to understand what consumers actually value, and it's not necessarily balancing the grid. Harold, if you could come in, and then hopefully we will be able to hear from Yvonne as well.
Yes, I'd like to add on to, as Delphine said, the end consumer does not or should not have to worry too much about flexibility and how it functions and everything like that. But I'd like to add on from the developer's perspective. I'm happy to hear from the people or developers I talk to that they are interested in the topic of flexibility from a very positive perspective. However, they often lack the understanding of how complex it can be. So often we have discussions with developers and they get discouraged when you talk about, okay, this and the solution is quite costly, or it takes a certain amount of time to set up, etc. That is a little bit of a challenge, I think, going forward, to keep the interest going from both developers and consumers, and not make them lose interest in the next forthcoming years. Because as I just said, we have massive of interest from both end consumers and developers, and have a lot of interesting discussions on how to solve different things, but getting actual projects on the ground isn't as easy as we would hope.
Yvonne, are you
Yes.
are you able to
Yes.
come into the conversation now? So
Yeah, and I hope my VPN will work. But I just want to say on the aggregation here, I think aggregation is really important. And with the new framework of Network Code for Demand Response, we will have both the framework or the regulatory framework for aggregation, but also for a market design that's needed to be able to have this aggregation of smaller assets in housing, because you need to aggregate them so that they can be used for different purposes. And I also want to say what was mentioned here before, I think it's a barrier that has been seldom discussed, is actually that you have this, it takes a long time for housing properties to be able to get their assets flexible, and there's still a gap here that is not addressed by anyone really. That producers of different resources or steering equipment, they don't always have processes in place so that possible flexible resources can participate in different markets. And here it's also one other barrier is that we don't have standardized data exchange for all these possible solutions, if it's markets or flexible connection agreements. And I think they go hand in hand, but sometimes it has taken 1 to 3 years for residential houses or even properties to be able to participate, because they can't get in contact with even the right person in that company and the process is not as existing. So here I think that we should put some attention, because that's really a barrier that very seldom discussed. So good that we have this here on the topic. But there is really good, I really want to say that there's really good experience today in local markets where you have aggregated resources participating, and they then participate in all markets. And as mentioned before, the customer doesn't even notice where they participate. They don't buy, I'm participating here or here. They get a kind of revenue, and they don't really understand where it comes from. So I really think that aggregation for residential houses is really an important way forward.
Thank you, Yvonne. And I
But
recognize
there's one issue we have to discuss also is actually cybersecurity, because when we are having steering equipment for everyone, we really need to understand that this cannot be compromised by actors who wants to sabotage. So we also have to have clear rules on cybersecurity. And also here it's important that this also somehow is a little bit standardized, because if it's too different in all countries, it will also be a barrier in itself. So we also have to have this with us when we go forward.
Thank you, Yvonne. I think I recognise a lot of those recommendations from your report from earlier this year on best practice for DSOs in working with distributed flexibility. Just two questions on that report. How are we doing in terms of implementing those recommendations across the DSOs? And we've mentioned the network code on demand response as coming up. Should we wait for that, or can DSOs be forging ahead rather than waiting for regulations?
A very good question, John. And I mean, EURES entities recommendation, and we do have our 50-year anniversary today, but our recommendation is actually for DSOs to be proactive and not wait for the regulation. The regulation is very, very demanding. It's very complex, and implementing it will be hard if you don't already work with flexibility. And DSOs will be in the center of implementing it through making national terms and conditions. So we really advise all DSOs actually to be proactive. But I also want to say there is a lot of things happening out there and a lot of DSOs who are taking active steps, but they have the same problem like the service providers that they still lack the regulatory certainty, and sometimes it's on the national level, it's not always on the EU level. So yeah.
And Margriet, I'm wondering how does that match your experience of working with both developers, consumers, and the networks?
Well, actually, we have set up quite a good cooperation with the networks over the past few years because of all the issues that we've had. So we really try to bring projects together where we have all parties involved. So if we see that a project is really struggling to get to move on, then we bring everybody on board and try to find new solutions together. That's where also I think innovations in contracts are being made right now, because we really have to find practical solutions for all the different aspects, and to make sure that all the risks for each party is well covered. There's actually a new initiative being launched this week to encourage households to add more flexible assets to the market, because our DSOs will be setting out a big bid together with the energy companies to create more flexibility from households. And that's also where I'm kind of jealous at Delphine. I'm not sure if you actually should be jealous or not, because you just mentioned the 15 million heat. No, it's not heat pumps, right? It's the water boilers. Yes, we don't have those in the Netherlands, which at this point in time is a good thing. But if we would have more steerable assets in the houses, it would be probably easier to also create more of this flexibility within our system as well. So maybe one thing that I'd like to mention in that aspect is that we actually also created an opportunity to build in V2G, vehicle to grid opportunities in the housing project that I just mentioned through the shared car concept. It would be very interesting. We see that it would be very interesting to make this a bigger part of the system as well, because if all the electric cars, at least in the Netherlands, would be V2G ready, then we would have a lot more batteries that could also play a huge role in the flexibility in the system. So maybe we should opt to see if all the cars that enter the European market as from 2030 onwards or something like that would be V2G ready as well, because it could be a big asset to the whole system.
So EVs and V2G are clearly part of the changes in the system. I think a couple of questions coming in, going back to the heating aspects, and really about the role of gas in the system, and how are we using hybrid systems to manage the transition. And also there's a question on the role of taxation that we see across Europe. A lot of the taxes and levies for decarbonisation are falling on electricity, making electrification more expensive, and less on gas. The Netherlands has been a big gas producer for a number of years. How do you see the role of gas in this transition, Margriet?
Well, our main, of course, is to decarbonize and to make sure that the role of gas will be a lot lower. But in the transition right now, we see that we actually need additional gas to support the system. One of our main concerns right now in our grid congestion situation is that we make sure that the grid actually stays safe. So we need to support the grid at some locations as well. Because I didn't really mention it earlier, but as from the July 1st, we actually faced a complete stop for connections in the Netherlands because it's not safe anymore to go on, to move further. So for us, flexibility is in different levels. We are looking in flexible assets that can actually support the system when needed. And that's partly with gas as well, also batteries. And we're looking into flexibility in the demand. So if you can steer both, then we can create a safe system, but also create a system that is ready for the future. Because in the future we need to get rid of the gas, and we will focus on a lot more renewable energy. But we also foresee that I believe it's around 2030 that is predicted that in the Netherlands we will not have enough electricity, and the new system with all the renewable energy is a lot less predictive than the system that we have with gas. But that is the way to move forward. So we need all this flexibility as well to be able to cope with this more unsecure system. That's the way that's actually where we are headed.
Thank you. I think we need to start wrapping up the discussion before we move on to the next session. So I'm wondering if I can first come to Delphine and maybe ask you for one summary, one example. That is there a regulation that you would want to see change? What's top of your list, or maybe what's one idea to engage consumers and get them on board?
So, I mean, on the regulatory side of things, as mentioned, I think there's something to do around opt-out consent model. And then on the submetering bottleneck. I think it's really key that we really push forward, this directive, and that's, essentially supply split becomes the norm across Europe. I think that's quite key. And I mean, as Yvonne mentioned, I think that the topic of cybersecurity must be addressed in parallel, of course, because if we push forward demand-side flexibility, I think it's quite key to make it secure by design. And so I think for operator, we're really happy if we can participate and be proactive in the regard of building secure system. And I mean, to engage consumer, as said, I think that demand-side flexibility should be seamless at the end of the day for the users. And that's how we will manage to scale this mass adoption. I think it's really important then to make them feel like they're part of something bigger, perhaps.
Part of something bigger. Thank you, Delphine. We're into the last minute, so if I could then turn to Yvonne for your last thoughts. Delphine mentioned cybersecurity. What else is your top of the list?
I think one key enabler is standardized data exchange. I think if we have that in place, a lot of other things will be easier. And secondly, I would say market design. I mentioned too.
Thank you. Harold, how about you?
Well, I mean, the challenge is no longer the actual assets. We know they have them. It's been mentioned before, but we need to, as you all mentioned, data question, integration, data automation at scale. And we know that flexibility works, but scaling requires trust, simple customer propositions and viable business models.
Thank you. And the last word to Margriet. How are you going to come out of this transition with the province of Utrecht leading the way?
a lot of focus on all sorts of flexibility, as I said, and I totally agree with the remarks that the others just said. One thing that I'd like to add is clear and simple communication for all our inhabitants as well, our citizens, because this is also already a very technical discussion with us together, and I've been trying to explain it to people that just live in my street, and it's quite a challenge to really explain simply what we are working on and why it's so important. So I think that that needs some attention as well.
Thank you. So it just remains on me to thank you all, panelists, for a very interesting discussion. The conclusion is that flexibility works, but there is a challenge in making something as complex as this simple for the consumer. So
Yeah.
I will hand back to Robert and say thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much also from my side to you, John, for moderating this discussion, and for the participants. I mean, clearly a very wealthy, a very rich debate, I would say, and highlighting a number of opportunities, but also challenges that we are still facing, of course, in this area, and we'll of course come back to the discussion later in the program, bearing in mind that we are also of course monitoring the chat and seeing the questions and the comments that are coming in, which we will be able to pick up also later. So thank you again. With that, we are moving on to the next part of the program, where we will hear from a number of best practices and lessons learned in 2 blocks. Firstly, I would like to give the floor to Jan Dirken from Vito, who will give us an overview of a number of EU-level examples that already exist today.
Yeah, thank you. I will share my screen first. Let me know if you can see it. Is it fine?
All good. We can see it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for confirming. Okay, so thank you for the introduction. And I've been asked to, within the next 10 minutes, give you a short overview of some examples of how demand-side flexibility is already being implemented across Europe. So I'm going to try to make this somehow concrete and show some real-world examples, and we can understand what is working and what challenges still remain. I'm going quickly over this because John already mentioned this in the previous session, but we have 3 main categories of flexibility. The first one being thermal flexibility, where we can use the building itself as a thermal storage and preheat and pre-cool the building with respect for the building, for the tenants or the building occupants. Next, there is electrical flexibility, which includes all kinds of smart appliances. Also, EV charging is included there, and the use of batteries, which all allow to shift electrical loads in time, and so contribute to a stable energy system. The last one is hybrid flexibility, which where often a lot of big opportunities lie. For example, this includes combining heat pump with thermal storage or solar PV with batteries and smart control. Now, in order to use flexibility, we need some key enabling technologies. Firstly, we need smart meters to actually measure what is going on. Next, we need building energy management systems to control assets and appliances which are available in a building. And lastly, we need aggregators which can combine many small actors in this field and contribute to the market or participate in the market. And I think aggregation is really something which connects all the examples I will give in this talk. I will focus on 4 examples across Europe. I must admit they're mostly across Western Europe, with Voltalis being an aggregator in France, or an aggregative system in France, which combines residential demand response from electrical heating perspective. Jetlix, which is now part of Kraken Technologies in Netherlands, focuses on smart electrical vehicle charging. There's Next Kraftwerke in Germany, which combines commercial buildings via BEMS. And the final one is a smaller pilot from Belgium, where I'm located, which combines, is a very lightweight system for using residential heat pump flexibility. But we'll go deeper in these in the next few moments. So first, let's start with France and Voltalis. I think this is one of the most established examples of how residential demand response works in Europe. What it does, it shows how everyday household consumption, like electric heating, can be aggregated in a large-scale flexible source. Now, how it works, Voltalis actually installs a gateway and controllers in houses to control electric heating devices and electric boilers. It does so by shortly modulating the consumption of these electric heating devices. Now, the impact on an individual level is quite small, but when you aggregate this across hundreds of thousands of homes, you actually can end up with a very valuable source of flexibility. And currently, this leads to a 1 gigawatt virtual power plant. There are a few items here on the right side. One, it's very consumer-centric. So the consumer actually participates without any loss of comfort or effort on its side. It is proven to be scalable, and it shows how this aggregated residential demand response is viable in practice, not only in just a pilot. And lastly, there's the market integration, because actually its flexibility is monetized in the market, especially as a balancing service. Now, I must say there are some barriers to this because the model quite heavily relies on electric heating, which is not very dominant in all European Union countries, with shares widely being different from country to country. Now, there is also some logistics on site required and an intervention, so it might hinder some scaling from that perspective. Second example is Jetlix, which I said is now part of Kraken Technologies. And this company provides a smart charging platform that unlocks flexibility from these electric vehicles. So what users do, they connect their car and they indicate when they want to have a full charge or when they need their car charged. And Jetlix will automatically optimize the charging process based on prices and the system needs. Now, also, one electrical vehicle is usually not a very big consumer, but if you can coordinate hundreds of thousands of cars, this actually becomes a very big source of flexibility and also one of the fastest growing electrical loads in Europe. That being said, it's very software driven, but there are also some barriers. Mainly that there's lots of car manufacturers, lots of different charging stations, so interoperability remains a challenge there. Also, the uptake of EV is not very constant across or very similar across the EU, and it's mainly driven by that. And also, you need to convince users to trust the system that their car will be charged when they actually need it. Now, also like the previous example of Voltalis, this example of Jetlix focuses on a single technology, and that's where the next example makes a difference. Now, Next Kraftwerke shifts actually from these individual technologies to a full system integration, and it's an aggregator that operates one of Europe's largest virtual power plants, connecting thousands of decentralized assets, such as renewable generation, storage, and industrial demand, into a single flexibility source. Now, it illustrates particularly well the commercial and digital angle of this this kind of business model, and especially large office buildings are already operated and to control the heating, cooling, and other loads. I'm gonna move a little bit forward here because I only have 10 minutes. Last example I have is this lightweight system of Nox Energy in Belgium, which actually controls household or domestic heat pumps, and it does so not by introducing new hardware, but via a single API. So it's very easy to access, but also interoperability remains a challenge here because we have a wide variety of heat pump manufacturers, but only a single API. And it allows them to shift the heating and cooling of hot water, shift heating and hot water to moments when electricity is cheap, clean, and abundant. And it happens automatically while keeping the indoor comfort within user-defined limits. Now, the main idea here is that software alone can enable existing devices to become flexible and price-driven responsive assets with a very small additional cost. So if we look back, take a step back from these examples, we can identify a few key points that stand out. So first one, I would say flexibility is no theoretical concept anymore. It's already being deployed today, as these small examples show, or these examples show, which I discussed briefly. It's working in homes, in electrical vehicle, EV charging, and commercial buildings. Now, what is crucial is the part of the aggregation, and individual actions are usually small, but when they are combined, they become actually meaningful from a system perspective. At the same time, we have some important barriers. There is the fragmentation across the member states of the EU, which makes it sometimes difficult to scale these solutions across Europe. What we also see is that sometimes price signals are weak or missing, so there is no real strong incentive to participate. Finally, there are some challenges about complexity, interoperability, and deployment cost, which also can lag or hinder the drive towards using actually this flexibility. Now, finally, I would also like to say something about what we are currently doing at Vito in our research, and it's actually built on these two concepts. One is the whole building flex orchestration, and grid interactive buildings. Now, what we've seen in the previous examples is that a lot of these technologies or solutions focus on a single asset, like controlling a heat pump or charging your electric vehicle. But what we want to do is actually combine all these assets and also consider what is the non-controllable part of non-controllable base load of a building, because that actually defines how much flexibility you have. And that we combine in a single solution. The second thing is the second part is related to the grid interactive building concept. So once a building can actually produce a coherent profile, its energy management system can publish two things to the outside world. One is a baseline forecast, and the other is actually a flexibility forecast. And in that way, also the system knows what a building can actually do in the near future, and the orchestration becomes actually more clear to the outside world, and you will not have competing signals fighting against each other. So the baseline here is that what we want to do in our research is moving from isolated flexibility sources to orchestrated buildings, and from individual buildings to coordinated grid interactive, let's say, pool of buildings, which is actually the foundation for the next phase of demand-side flexibility. So I went a little bit over time. I hope it's still okay. But I think what I wanted to do in this introduction is show that flexibility actually exists. Aggregation will unlock it, and coordination is what can scale it all. That's it from my side as introduction. I hope if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you very much, Jan, for this interesting overview. There is, I mean, a question that I had, but fortunately also somebody in the chat asked when we presented our sort of efforts within DG Energy to our new Director General the other day. Her first question was, well, what's in it for consumers? And that's exactly the question. Do you have any evidence or data that shows what the gains for homeowners are when they are providing flexibility?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it was also touched upon in the previous session that users usually don't care what happens in the grid. It's only when they feel it in the wallet that they might become interested in it. So I think that's also one of the things that we should focus on. How can we give users access to to a financial gain, because that will be the main driver, I think, to really unlock or engage users to give access to this kind of flexibility. I hope that answers your questions a bit, but indeed, that's a difficult one especially for homeowners and individual residential buildings to I think it's a main barrier.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that actually provides quite a nice bridge to our next speakers, because we have with us Marcia Poletti and Nigel Banks from Octopus Energy, and they of course also have experience with providing flexibility and are in this on this boundary, let's say, between the electricity market and consumers, and maybe in their presentation they can also pick up on this particular question. So with that, I will give the floor to Marcia and Nigel to present their approach to flexibility.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity to chat. We're going to do a double act. Nigel, who knows everything about our Zero Bill Homes initiative, will talk about how it all works and what's in it for consumers. And then I'll follow up with a short couple of slides around what's stopping this rolling out at scale with lots of other people besides just Octopus. So thank you very much, and over to Nigel.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nigel Banks. I'm Technical Director at Octopus and lead our work on our Zero Bills Home programme. And I think the key focus of what we're trying to do with Zero Bills is create an incredible end consumer proposition that doesn't require any significant effort from the end customer. So it needs to be an attractive financial proposition, but without the significant requirement to be an expert in energy and controls and systems. And that's one of the key things that comes through all of our smart tariffs is what's the consumer's need, how do we best serve that, and always making sure the customer need comes first, and then deliver the best financial proposition in the consumer's interest at the heart of the proposition. So as we all know, the energy landscape has shifted massively from centralized fossil generation in a linear direction going down to the consumer, to now volatile, decentralized generation and storage, but also the potential for customers to generate their own power in the home, as well as have assets in the home which can store that energy, whether that be an electric car, whether that be a home battery, whether it be a hot water cylinder. And the key, and what we're trying to do here, is unlock the benefits, both for the customer, but also for the grid, and in many cases also for other key stakeholders in the built environment, such as landlords, such as house builders. So it's in everyone's financial interest to adopt these technologies at scale in a way where they're helping the grid rather than hindering the grid. And one of the key things that's been mentioned is how do you drive that consumer benefit, and that is largely around, we've got to unlock the financial business case for Octopus. We're not doing Zero Bills Homes to just for the benefit of the customer. It needs to be financially attractive for Octopus as well. And most customers in the UK and across most parts of Europe pay a flat rate for their electricity, which is the green line. But most suppliers see the wholesale market layered on top with transmission distribution charges, which is the white line. And we actually offer this white line as a tariff called our Agile tariff, and that is very much for the energy nerds who want to optimize their own home's energy system. So what we're trying to do is, how do we make use of that time when the wind is blowing, like Storm Amy and Storm Benjamin that came through, when prices went to 0 or negative? Can we run a heat pump at that time, heat up the hot water, charge batteries, and then can we discharge in those peak windows? And even in the still and cloudy, dunkelflower period we had in mid-October, the price overnight was still almost half that of the standard average price. The real opportunity exists if we can load shift for us to unlock that. And if you can generate enough power and sell that at peak to cover the cost of importing at off-peak, you can get to a point where you can cover all your energy costs and be able to offer a customer a zero energy bill. And we now have a really wide range of tariffs available in the UK and in many European countries as well now, which are very much focused around how do we service the devices that the customer have got in their home to best suit their needs. So an EV tariff, our Intelligent Octopus Go tariff, is around, I want my car charged by 7 in the morning. We then make sure it's charged by that point in the most optimal time. Whereas our heat pump tariff has 3 periods of low prices to suit the needs of heating and hot water generation. So the morning, early afternoon and late evening. So you need to make sure the devices and the tariffs work together. But the beautiful thing about Zero Bills is we're basically able to bring all of those different technologies together and combine them into one tariff. And we are, with Zero Bills, not just solving a cost of living crisis, but we're also helping unlock the viability of new homes, which is a big challenge across Europe. Addressing climate crisis, because these homes are truly zero carbon in operation. They're generating more energy in the year than they're using. And critically, from a health perspective, particularly in existing buildings, people aren't concerned about putting their heating on because they know they can heat their home and not have to deal without having a worry about an energy bill. So what does a zero bill home look like? This is one of the hundreds of homes we've got built. We've got thousands in construction now in the UK, and again hundreds in Germany, and the first coming through in France, and we've got some in New Zealand as well, and I'll show you those later. But typically we need lots of solar. So this is a pretty typical looking semi-detached 3-bedroom house in just outside London. We have 12 solar panels there on both sides of the roof, as well as a 13.5 kilowatt hour home battery, an air source heat pump, and an EV charger. So we are controlling the heat pump, the EV charger, and the home battery to optimize those 3 key assets, which are the predominant drivers of load to deliver a zero energy bill. And the way it works is we smart control those against the customer's preferences. So the customer sets their temperature preferences for the heat pump. We take full control of the battery, so in terms of deciding when it's charged, discharged. And with the EV, the customer can set their preferences around when their EV charging. And we now guarantee zero bills, depending on which country we're in and what property we're in, between 5 and 10 years. So new build homes in England now have a 10-year guarantee. In Germany, it's 6 years. And some of the terms and conditions are slightly different between different countries in terms of there is a fair use cap, so it's not limitless free energy. And in the UK, we separate EV charging out and bill that separately. In Germany, that's included within the fair use rate. So you can adjust this accordingly to make sure it works within the local framework. One of the key challenges is you do need to make it economically attractive for all the parties, and it needs to work for you as an energy supplier. And some of the access to markets and the energy price signals are critical, and Marshall will come on to talk about that. So we are live in the UK, Germany, France, and New Zealand. We're exploring opportunities in Italy and USA as well. It's tricky in Spain and Japan, and we'll come on to some of the reasons why that is at the moment. And it's certainly easier in some countries than others. Generally, you run out of roof space on certain house types for enough solar for it to make to make the economics work. And that's the challenge, particularly on retrofits, because on a retrofit home, the insulation obviously isn't as good. The heating goes up, and potentially the cooling as well. that makes it a difficult challenge. But in new builds, it is relatively straightforward to do. And one of the key things around how this is helping the grid is we're finding this is a sort of a beacon product, a sort of inspirational product where people are looking at zero bills homes and people are referencing zero bills homes as a sort of aspiration in a similar way that many sort of architects point towards Passive House. I think zero bills makes a zero carbon home much more tangible, and it's enabling the funded rollout of these technologies. We're unlocking the financial benefits of these technologies to enable it to be rolled out in new homes at scale, and looking at rolling it out into retrofit. Also, new housing developments are often causing problems to grids. They're adding extra loads in areas already under constraint, whereas if we are generally exporting at peak time rather than importing, if you look on a timed basis, we're actually supporting the overall grid and not adding significant loads to peak. In fact, we might be helping reduce peak loads locally and providing that local demand flexibility and ability to support the grid. So we've been doing this now for about 4 years. We've worked with most of, if not all of the major house builders in the UK who've done trials and looking to roll that out. The biggest barrier we've had in the UK is still 90% of homes are built with gas boilers. The legislation has now been passed. That means next year we'll be moving to heat pumps as standard. But that has been a big barrier to adoption, as has the upfront cost of installing the equipment. But we've certainly seen that cost has been dropping significantly. And that is really making the economics work for us in a much better way. So the cost of solar dropping, the cost of batteries dropping, designing in with these technologies. We've also done retrofits. We've done a 130-year-old mid-terrace home in London, which most people in the UK see as the sort of hardest house to decarbonise. That had 6 500-watt panels on both sides of the roof, a heat pump in the rear garden, as well as a home battery. And then we've done some very recently built homes that were built with gas, and we've refurbished that for a financial institution. And we've also done some council housing, some social housing that were built after the war, and retrofit those to zero bills. It does work, but it is tricky. You'll see that the homes are either already insulated or new, or they're a mid-terrace home, whereas the property next door, the end terrace with a significant external wall that isn't insulated, would have been very hard to do or not possible to do with the roof space available with the current economics that are there. In Germany, we have been partnering with a series of house builders. So you can see some of the names there, and I'm sure they'll be familiar to anyone in the German market. Typically, those are one-off homes that are being built, but we now have some developments of home where all the homes on the site will be zero bills, and some of those developers are offering zero bills as a customer extra to incentivize them to install solar battery alongside typically heat pumps already on those homes, and that enables the house builder to recover the cost and the consumer to have access to technology already installed that's smart controlled. We have done some retrofits, but they've generally been recently built homes by those house builders to date, and they've tended to be fairly large homes to date. A lot of the social housing in much of Europe, I think, is apartments rather than housings. It's a slightly different housing typology. We've recently launched in France, so we've done some retrofits in and around the Paris area and working with house builders as well. So we've got development in Les Toupes where we have 50 homes where the developer is offering 2 options, either a zero bills home where you have the solar PV on the roof, or a green roof, sort of a planted roof. And interesting, the zero bills option is cheaper than the green roof option. So we expect a lot of customers will go for the zero bills option. We've worked with the 2 biggest house builders in New Zealand and have now got zero bills homes with both of those. They're now available. Recently done that with Fletcher Living. The New Zealand example is interesting because we've done both North Island and South Island. You've got quite a different climate between the 2 islands in New Zealand, and the North Island is quite hot. You've got quite significant air conditioning, quite humid, so perhaps more similar to the southern parts of Europe. But the economics do work. You get much better solar there as well, and that offsets the air conditioning requirements as well. So I think I'll pass over to Marsha, and she can talk through the barriers.
So it's been really good listening to everyone talk this morning about the challenges they're finding with flexibility and with customer propositions. And I think there was a comment that was made by Jan just earlier, saying, you know, flexibility is real, it's here, it's valuable. And I think the real challenge is there are many barriers to seeing that system value translate into something for the customer. And unless we can address those barriers, it makes it hard to roll this out at scale. So Nigel also said, look, you know, in Germany, we're doing sort of 6-year zero bill homes, and that is reflecting the markets that we can access. So I'm going to talk through some of the barriers, and then we'll look across Europe at a few selected countries to look at the individual problems that we face. So from a technical point of view, this is easy to do. You know, the physics work. And it's about incorporating that fundamental flex value into the customer proposition. And the key values there are the wholesale arbitrage. And you could see those swings in price, and that's true across Europe. There is lots of ability to avoid those really high cost prices. Now, for aggregators across Europe, that's not universally true. So France has a framework that allows independent aggregators to do wholesale arbitrage, but across much of Europe, that's not possible. The next thing is around curtailment avoidance. So that's both at low voltage level and high voltage level. And to give you a scale of this, the estimated grid upgrades to low voltage networks across Europe are around 730 billion euros by 2040. Now, a bit less than half, around 300 billion, is for load-related expenditure. And, you know, looking at the example of the Netherlands, you think, well, we need to upgrade the grids. But the other important statistic to think about is how much of the grid is used. And actually at low voltage level, the average network utilization is around 10%. So 90% of the time there is space on the network. So that's a huge figure. And what concepts like zero bills are about is using the grid when it's empty and then supporting the grid at those peak times. And then the last element is around the last element of flexibility is providing services to system operators. So that's, you know, balancing the system on a second by second basis, providing frequency or voltage support. There's a whole range of things that zero bill homes or consumer flexibility can provide. So if we want to unleash zero bills more widely, you need to address these barriers. And one of the key ones is this asymmetric grid tariff. So what do I mean by that? I mean, when I use the network to import electricity as a consumer, I pay, and I often pay a tax at that point as well. When I export, not only do I not get that tax back, but I have to pay when I'm exporting, even if I am exporting at peak, which is helping the grid. And so a symmetric or near symmetric grid tariff is one where I'm being paid roughly the same amount as I pay to use the grid if I'm importing and exporting. So that's the first thing. The second thing is all of these ways I can support the grid, so balancing the system, providing frequency or voltage support, providing services and redispatch for transmission system operators, helping provide an emergency response in capacity markets. These are all real things. And in the UK, I can get access to all those markets. That's not universally true across Europe. And then lastly, Yvonne talked about the network code for demand response across Europe. And yes, that will happen. But right now, there are very limited DSO markets. And I think I've now spent the last 4 years working across Europe with European DSOs and TSOs. And I think one of the key challenges is most regulatory regimes across Europe focus on incentivizing DSOs to build a network, basically. And if you incentivize something to happen, it generally does. So we incentivize DSOs to build rather than use non-wires alternatives. And then we seem surprised when flexibility is hard to realize. So if there was one change to think about, it would be thinking about what we are encouraging DSOs to do and how they can make money. And if you look across France, Italy, Germany, Spain, and Great Britain, so we started the concept in the UK. We get money when we export into the grid at peak times. And that's how the combination of all these markets is how you can give customers a zero bill home. So we can export at peak times, we can participate in most ancillary service markets. There are liquid DSO flexibility markets procuring almost 10 gigawatts of flexibility in the 24-25 period, and obviously value in the wholesale. Now, across Europe, great value in wholesale. Germany, very, very liquid wholesale markets. But you can see across the rest of the elements, there are many blockers. So Germany, high asymmetric network fees. This is changing. So by 2027, they're working on changes that will remove double taxation on grids. But you can see that while the value to the system exists from a technical and physical point of view, it's not possible to share that value with consumers. And so I'll stop there, and perhaps there are questions for any of the three of us.
Yes, thank you very much for that. So, I mean, you talked a lot about zero energy bills or zero bills. Do you have a sense of sort of on average across your installed stock, if I can say so, what consumers are saving?
So, well, obviously on the zero bills homes, they're saving their full energy bill, which on average is around €2,000 a year. Bigger homes are saving more. Customers with an EV are typically saving between €500 to €1,000 a year with our Intelligent Octopus Go smart tariff. So they're charged around 7 or 8 pence per kilowatt hour instead of 25 pence kilowatt hour, so sort of 70% cheaper. On our Cozy heat pump tariff, the unit rate in the cheap periods is half that of the standard rate. Again, customers are typically reducing their bill by 30-40%. So by the different tariffs, those sort of savings are significant.
But the numbers that Nigel's talking about are based on the UK. So across Europe, the sort of the comparison on the IO Go product, the average customer in the UK is saving, 700, 800 euros. The comparable product in Germany, France, Spain, and Italy is probably closer to 300 to 400 euros. And that's not because we're ripping off European customers. It's because wherever you're seeing those red and orange boxes, we can't access that value to pass on.
Okay, thank you. That's clear. I'm picking up on a couple more questions earlier in your presentation, Nigel, which has to do with, you mentioned gas boilers that act as a barrier to zero bills, and also a question around the technicalities of fitting north-facing roofs with PV. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on those elements?
Yeah, so it's been a challenge to explain to house builders the benefits of putting solar on both sides of the roof. And one of the things that people have become more comfortable fitting solar on east and west facing roofs, but actually fitting solar on north and south facing roofs generates the same annual generation as east and west. But actually financially, it's often better for us to have north and south, because in the winter months, you get more from the southern roofs. And in the summer months, you're getting more in the late evening, early morning from the more northerly facing roofs. So I think it's one of those things that it's historically been a significant problematic, sort of seen as a not the right thing to do. I think the other thing which people have been surprised at is often we're fitting 10, 12 kilowatts of solar on the roof, but across two sides of the roof, but we only ever don't export much more than 5 kilowatts. So even though we have a lot of solar on the roof, we're not actually exporting that volume because the sun doesn't shine on both sides of the roof at the same time. And actually, even where you have a limited grid export of 3.68 kilowatts in parts of England, that only works out about 5% curtailment on that solar on an annual basis. So I think it's useful to run the numbers and people to understand the viability. And I think with the cost of solar where it is now, actually makes sense to put solar on any available roof space to a limit. On a very large single-story house, you probably don't need to fill the whole roof, but on a 2-story or 3-story or apartment block, it makes sense to fill the whole roof on both sides. And the other part, Robert, was
on gas boilers. I think you mentioned that lots of gas boilers make it harder, and the question, I guess, from the gas side is, well, why is that?
So we need the home to be all electric to be able to flex the heating and hot water as well. So whereas if you're on gas, the price of gas is pretty much fixed and there's no opportunity for flex and reducing the cost of that. And also it doesn't deliver the decarbonisation of the home. So we're importing a lot of gas into the UK, and the carbon emissions of gas is 2 or 3 times that of electricity on a like-for-like basis, and through a heat pump it's sort of 8 or 9 times high carbon to run a gas boiler. So it's being phased out in new homes, but the existing stock, and this is one of the things that combining solar, battery and a heat pump can actually make the retrofit of a heat pump more attractive, because the technologies can work together, and the solar battery helps unlock more savings from the heat pump. So some people have called it the holy trilogy of technologies when they come together. And with an electric vehicle, you get to a fully decarbonised home and driving.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, maybe picking up on some of the elements and bringing Jan Dirke back in the conversation. So, I mean, I'm hearing from you that it is really, you are directly controlling these assets in homes. When Jan was speaking, I mean, he was talking about also systems whereby you have building energy management systems that act as a sort of an aggregator of the assets in the home, and then sort of create signals to the grid, if I can say so. Jan, do you see sort of where this is moving in the near future? Do you see it more directly controlling assets like Octopus is doing, or do you see a bigger role for whether it's, you know, hardware or software building energy management systems that play a role in the aggregation of these assets?
Yeah, that's a good question. At the moment, I don't have a good view on that, I think. But I think orchestration of all assets is indeed key, and to come up to the outside world as a building with a solid plan and avoid competing assets. I mean, assets reacting to the same price signal at once, and then creating spreads in that way can also be harmful towards the system, I think. So I think the action towards the outside should be harmonized, and how that's done, I think is still an open debate.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if Nigel or Marcia want to come in on this particular point. Or...
So if we are to fully decarbonise, you need to be thinking about the assets within the home and ensuring that they are working together. And as Jan mentioned earlier, you also need to think across that entire feeder that secondary substation, that primary substation. So actually, we see in the future much greater coordination, primarily initially through markets, with the DSOs acting sort of as a last resort and ensuring that they call on the flexibility first.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I'm seeing lively comments also in the chat, some directly addressed to the guys from Octopus. Maybe you can respond in the chat. I mean, we've come to the end of this particular session. Thank you both to Jan and Nigel and Marcia for your interesting presentations. We will break for 15 minutes, come back at 11, have a further set of best practices, and then we'll have an hour of discussion where the floor will be open to the participants in the call. You can then raise your hand or write in the chat, and we will have a broader discussion with input from everybody who's online, should they want to come in. Thank you very much, and see you all back at 11.
Thank you.
Welcome back. On the second part of the presentation of best practices, and we will start there with an example from an EU finance project, Be Flexible, which has pilots across the EU, and we're very happy to have Peter Berne with us, who will present one of the pilot projects that seems to be most relevant for demand-side flexibility in buildings. And so, Peter, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, and very happy to be here and have the opportunity to present our solution that we piloted and developed in the Horizon project, Be Flexible. I will see if I can share my screen, so I hope I will be able. So can you see my screen now?
Not yet.
Okay. It should be sharing here, if I can see correctly. I try upload it again then.
I see somebody in the chat saying that they can see it, so maybe this
Okay.
is just us in the room.
Okay, I hope you soon will be able to see them then also. But do you like to share, or should I continue sharing from my computer? I continue then. But I can't see you now, so I'm I'm a bit worried.
Yes, please continue. It seems that people online can see the presentation, so that's most important.
Okay. So
now they can't see it anymore, so I'm not sure what is happening.
My apologies. So let's try again now. I hope it's okay now. So I will present a solution we call HeatFlex, and it's about optimizing distributed heat pumps for both the day-ahead market and local flexibility markets. And I work at the E.ON company Energy Infrastructure Solution as a program lead for our asset flexibility optimization program. So starting a bit about the Be Flexible project, it's a big consortium with many different actors that all play an important role in the ecosystem of flexibility, if I put it like that. So it's,
Peter,
yep.
sorry to interrupt. Could you click on the slideshow so that people see the full slides? Because now they see the other window.
Okay, I'm not so used to WebEx here, so I saw the whole presentation, so I tried to do it again then. So I do it the whole screen.
Now we're seeing your screen. Now we're seeing the presentation.
Yes, to click in.
Can you click
So-
in PowerPoint on the slideshow?
Yeah.
What about now?
Perfect. It's perfect.
Okay, my apologies. Let's do it again then. So it's a huge project. We've been running for 48 months, and we're coming to an end now. A budget of 10 million euro. So I will represent the DMOT 2 in this project, which is the North European. We have had the focus on both platform and architecture, market and regulation, the service ecosystem, and customer engagement and value proposition to drive and increase the flexibility on the European market. So the aim for our demonstration in the North European is to unlock loads in building for flexibility reasons, with a target to both DSO and TSO markets. But we also really want to investigate how we can incentivize the participation of prosumers or customers with distributed energy assets to participate on these local flexibility market or external markets. And then I think also the importance of optimization on building level has proven to be as important for the project. So short information about local flexibility market. That's also our sister company, the E.ON Energy Networks, have had that as target in this project to develop these local flexibility markets. And that is to establish a market mechanism to get the grid customer to participate with their flexibility in order to mitigate congestion challenges in the both the local and regional grid. So the DSO, they forecast that there will be insufficient capacity. That means that there will be a demand for flexibility from the DSO side. So they have then set up agreement both with the distributed flexibility service providers, aggregators, but also larger scale flexibility providers to act on these market signals and agreed on contract in order to do so. So that is now well developed in the project. We went during the project time from 2 local flexibility markets, and now we have deployed 12 local flexibility markets where we have connected assets. So importance for us in the project, looking on how to incentivize the building owners, residentials with energy assets, is to understand the value not only in front of the meter, providing flexibility to this market, but also behind the meter. So that has been an important target when we have developed the HeatFlex solution. With the HeatFlex solution, we utilize the thermal inertia in steering then heat pump heat generation. We have an AI-based smart control system, and the heating is shifted in a way that we can optimize the consumption both on the day-ahead market, but also to offset flexibility when there is a demand for that in the local flexibility market. Also very important in doing this is that we need to ensure that this won't affect the customer comfort level. So fully utilizing the thermal inertia without causing any temperature drops in the building. So what is then HeatFlex as a solution? It has IoT-based solution, software as a service, you can say, where key capabilities is connectivity. So we have developed a gateway to connect to building management system, and this is where all the steering is done. So we're not connecting the actual asset directly, but rather the building management system that are then affecting the heating system in the building. One other important capability is of course, the optimization. And here we have a data-driven model, which I will go through a little bit more in detail. And with this data-driven model, we can execute the optimization. And in order to do so efficiently, a third capability that is key in this is the real-time control. So the real-time algorithm executes the optimization and affect how the building heating system is activated over time. So the optimization is done mainly with 3 different input data. We have the energy market and prices that goes into the thermal flex optimization model. We have data that is important for the energy forecasting, weather data, historical energy data, and so forth. But also essential is the ability to gather data from the building and understand the building's local prerequisites, such as how is energy used in the building over time, what is the thermal inertia, and based on that, how much flexibility can we gather or establish in the building. And that's the calculations that is done in the thermal flex optimization module. And the output of this data-driven optimization is then the flexibility activation schedule. Moving forward, so HeatFlex was one out of several pilots in the Be Flexible project. And to wrap it up, we had 9 customers, more than 30 buildings, and connected around 60 heat pumps in this pilot. The use cases, I mentioned them a little bit earlier also, was both acknowledging behind the meter optimization and also offsetting flexibility on the local flexibility market. All in all, we had around 1.5 megawatt connected distributed assets in power. And we ran the pilot between February and March 2026. Also important for the pilot was to really connect the heterogeneous setup. So working with different vendors, different type of buildings in order to understand how we can scale forward after the pilot. So starting with the first pilot with the behind the meter optimization, it's quite straightforward optimization based on the day-ahead prices. And in this graph, we can see that when the prices are high, this blue greenish graph here, then we could offset the heat pump to produce less during those hours. But we could also increase production when the price was low, so we charge the building with energy. In that way, we really even out the time of use of the heat pump and can optimize the cost on the customer side. The result was that we achieved around 20 to 30 euro per installed kilowatt in cost saving. And that relates to approximately up to 20% reduction in electricity cost. And we did all this without no impact on the indoor comfort. So that relates to 100 kilowatt installed power, maybe 2,500 euro a year approximately in cost saving. Moving forward to offsetting the flexibility to local flexibility markets, this was done in 2 residential complexes in the city of Malmö with ground source heat pump. I think we really proved that we could do this successfully, and we piloted this winter and created additionally 12,000 euros in revenue. So on top of the day ahead optimization that also was done in this pilot. Maybe to wrap it up, the pilot a bit, I think heat pump we could prove in the pilot that provides reliable flexibility. It has a good advantage to have the linkage between heat production and power, really enabling utilization of the flexibility on the thermal side with the thermal inertia in buildings. We also showed that we developed a solution that could communicate and act towards different vendors, different type of buildings, but also, as I think several of earlier speakers and Yvonne mentioned, standardization is of course key here in order to easily connect different types of system on the distributed side here. Also, installation integration. This is a key bottleneck. I think we heard about the need for a seamless integration end to end here. I think it was Delphine that mentioned that. I think that relates quite well to the need we see here in order to be able to scale this solution efficiently also. And of course, we are working with collaboration with installers and so forth on the more practical hands-on side there. Customer impact is minimal. Transparency is crucial. We need to put an effort moving forward to even develop further the customer user interface. Information feedback is essential there. So providing transparency on cost saving, steering, and interference of the customer-centered system. Also, the local flexibility market provides a clear value for distributed flexibility service provider to participate on the market mechanisms. And I think also a point in that is that the DSO behind the markets here have secured a long-term market also. They have informed that we will operate the market for this many years at least, and we will at least require this amount of power, and that provides some certainty that it's actually worth the effort in going out to the market and making those investment necessary. Next step is to scale further and also, as we heard before, work with the automation part of this in the control side, and also continue working with more easily access to the market participation. Metering, key in this also, not only that there are a smart metering customer level, but we also have access to the data. And of course, we need to have the business model and really think about how we can combine both behind the meter optimization, providing cost savings for the customer, but also adding additional revenues to that. And local flexibility is the first proof point here, but of course, we see that that flexibility could be utilized for both arbitrage and ancillary services such as MFRR. So, sorry, my voice, and that was it for now, and happy to answer some questions moving forward here.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this informative presentation. Indeed, I mean, you mentioned yourself that one of the issues is linked to that you need to have contacts with vendors and have sort of good links there. And this picks up on a question from Carolina that talks about whether you ran into any interoperability issues in the context of the project.
Yeah, I think we developed this on our Ecto Cloud solution, and in that we have connected hundreds of buildings earlier, both for district heating optimization purposes and also linking to the EctoGrid solution that we heard Harald mention earlier. So we are quite mature in connecting different vendors with different management systems. That said, it's still a topic, of course. So standardization or harmonization of protocols, but I think we've come quite far on that side now with communication protocols and APIs and so forth.
Thank you. Yeah, this allows me to plug the voluntary code of conduct that we have on energy smart appliances, where that code of conduct is aimed at coming up with sort of the functionalities that appliances have to have in order to be able to benefit from flexibility contracts, for example, et cetera, et cetera. So there is work ongoing also from our side currently on a voluntary basis to support that. I mean, maybe another question I would have is linked to the maturity of the market. So Sweden is, of course, a very mature heat pump market, if I can say so. I mean, do you see issues with the scalability of what you're doing there to other markets where heat pumps may not have so much penetration? Would that be an issue, you think?
I don't think so, actually. I mean, the solution is I mean, it needs to be scalable, and we need to continue working on that, obviously. What also is more regional maybe is, for instance, the market potentials. And in Sweden, we have these 12 local flexibility markets, and we have one additional that is operated from Gothenburg Energy. But they have developed standardized interface for market access. So it's not 12 different market integrations that are needed, it's one. So that's, of course, good prerequisites, if I say it like that. But if you're gonna bring the solution combining behind the meter and in front of the meter optimization to other regions, then of course you need to understand, okay, how do we enable the more upwards integration to the markets, if I put it like that. I think that's maybe a bigger challenge than how to secure connection downstream to the heat pumps.
Okay, clear. Thank you very much. With that, thank you again for your presentation. Please stay with us if you can. Our next speaker in this session is Marek Ostern from SmartN, who will provide us with a bit more detail about the activation of flexibility, in particular focused on residential buildings.
Yes, thank you.
Marek?
I'm here. Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Perfect. Let me just share my screen. Now to the big question, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. I also have to apologize ahead of time for my voice. I have a bit of a cough, so if I interrupt myself, apologies for that. But yes, thank you for organizing this workshop. This is really important for us, and really to show that projects in flexibility in residential buildings are already happening at scale, and that we can do much more with what we already have. So it's really timely. Very quickly, I'm from SmartN, Smart Energy Europe. We represent what we call the flexible demand management industry. So we represent companies that help consumers make the demand flexible in every sector, but including buildings. This is a bit of a reminder. I think everybody understands what flexibility in buildings look like, but just wanted to make the point obvious and clear. We're talking generally about either directly controlling an asset, but we can also talk about an home energy management system that controls the entire house and provides that kind of demand side flexibility, but for the entire building. So this is less what we're going to talk about today. We have more examples in the single asset, but just to make everybody bring that in front of everybody's mind. Again, sort of a reminder, but benefits of flexible buildings are huge. The grid, everybody knows those. Network congestion, network costs, investment costs. But I want to make the point that in buildings, we have this additional dimension, especially residential buildings, which is we are actually providing benefits to the consumers. And that's in terms of reduced energy costs, lower carbon footprints, increase affordability of homes. And that's a benefit that really makes flexibility in buildings a win-win, both for the system and for everybody there. Before I dive into exact examples of activation, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. Flexibility is dependent on the right framework and the right market, as we talked about before. So this is old data, and that's what we have, but from 2024, just so to be aware. But it shows access to the wholesale market for explicit flexibility, so participating in the markets and bidding on it generally with an aggregator, and implicit flexibility where price signals are driving consumer behavior. And as you can see, there's a whole lot of red in the explicit flexibility. That is because there is a lot of member states that have not yet fully implemented the necessary legislation at EU level, and that creates real issues in scaling. Apologies, in scaling our product, because basically without the market, it's really difficult for aggregators to participate and really enroll building owners and residents, even though there is demand for it. So just keep that in mind. And as you can see, implicit is way more advanced and way more widespread that explicit flexibility can be at this time. But enough with that, let's dive in a few examples. So the first one comes from the Netherlands with EVs. So the big problem here is obviously you have EVs in the system. That's great. You have more and more EVs, but generally in homes, they all charge at the same time, which creates potentially congestion in the grid, can cause some serious issues. So here we have a member, GridX, partnering with Essent, who are deploying the chargers themselves to provide implicit flexibility. So that would be adapting the car based on the price of the electricity and therefore on the demand on the network itself. So this is a project that is happening in the Netherlands. It started really in Q3 2025, so it's relatively recent, focusing on single-family homes because this is where they saw the most demand in terms of charging. But the good thing is, because of that system, in a matter of a quarter, so by the end of that year, they had been able to migrate thousands of EVs from just being passive assets to being active assets. And that's what we're looking for. And that's how you activate that flexibility. So the solution in itself is quite simple. GridX has a platform and a box that connects to, in this case, the EVs, but can connect to energy management system and can be controlling the entire house if needed. But in this case, it really goes to the EV and it provides data about the consumption. It provides the consumer's preference, and that's key. So for example, the consumer can say, okay, I need my car to be charged at 80% because I'm leaving at 8 a.m. tomorrow for work, so I need the car charged. And that is then provided to GridX into the platform. And then GridX has access to network prices and has access to weather data and can use AI to predict what the cost of electricity will be. And based on that, it will develop a charging timeline for the car in that period. So you charge your car generally when you come home, you plug the car in and you go to dinner. And during that time, during the entire night, GridX will decide, okay, we need to have this level of charge by that time. So we are going to charge at that time because we think the electricity is going to be cheaper at this moment, and therefore the load on the grid is going to be lower. So it automatically does that. It automatically provides a schedule, and consumers are completely free to forget about it. And that's a key point I want to make in this presentation. If we want consumers to participate in flexibility, we need to make it as hassle-free as possible, as been mentioned before. We need to make sure that they can just enroll and then forget. And that's what these sort of cloud solutions also provide. We talk a lot about assets deployment, we talk about activation, but let's not forget that this is the dimension of making sure that the data is there and it's automated and that it's seamless for partners. That's great, but mostly for consumers. So we can see is, just to mention that the platform also allows to go into explicit flexibility, so aggregating these different EVs and then participating on the market. This project has not yet done that. They decided to start with purely implicit flexibility, but just so you're aware, this is a possibility that they have now, they can already link up all these cars and go with them on the market tomorrow, basically, if they decided to. In terms of results, we can see a consumer benefit of up to 300 euros a year of savings per EV. That's right now with the implicit flexibility. Could be, of course, more if they participate in explicit flexibility, because then you have revenues that come in. But that already provides a good saving for the consumer, and that's based on 6 hours plug-in. Generally, I would say most people plug maybe a bit longer than that. Now, for the system, of course, the benefit is clear. Thousands of EVs that were passive and were drained on the system at the same time now become grid assets and provide increased flexibility, and so therefore stability to the grid, and optimize the use of our electricity. And even for the partner, in this case, Essent, GridX has found that they find this solution very important, because not only it unlocks potential new revenue sources later down the line, but also increases customer loyalty. Of course, 300 euros of savings is not something most people would frown upon, and that helps be just simply cheaper and therefore better for the consumers. So this is an example of how software is used as a way of activating what would be normally just passive assets. We talk about non-dedicated assets a lot, because this is one of them. This is assets that are installed for something else, that are there, and generally in homes. We're talking about heat pumps earlier, but that's also a case. And we let them sit there passively, whereas we could activate their flexibility using services like this one. Just moving a bit from country to country here, moving to France, we're talking about here about explicit flexibility with our member Voltalis. So here the project started, just to give you a bit of context, in 2022. So this was as response to the first energy crisis we all faced in 2022. The council of Cergy-Pontoise was looking for a way to mitigate the cost of electricity on their consumers, and one of the ways they found to do that was to partner up with our member Voltalis, who's providing explicit flexibility on heating. So they came in with a big campaign to retrofit their electrically heated households using wide range of media for communication, because of course here the key is the take-up. As we see here, the type of buildings are both domestic and commercial, but mostly I've been told that in France, most of the heating, electrically heated buildings are actually households. So this is mostly residential. What they do, Voltalis, they provide their box and they install their box in about 2 hours. It's again on assets that are already there, electrically heated households. So it could be heat pumps, it could be electrically water heating. It just provides that box, connects that box, and that box provides the ability to control for the consumers. They can control the level of comfort, their temperature room by room, etc. Without compromising any of that. Then Voltalis can come in and aggregate the flexibility potential of all those users and bid on them open markets that are open in France for that. The good thing about this system is the boxes and the installation are absolutely free, because the remuneration comes from the market itself, the participation in the market. So that's really a big win-win for everyone. They also train local electricians to do the installation to really, provide local benefits, but also increase trust and participation. The first aim was to have about 2,000 installation and first rollout. They got 2,100 with an 81% adoption rate, which is pretty huge in terms of adoption. For the consumers, the benefits were not necessarily on the flexibility side, because that's not what they were looking at, but there was an energy reduction and in CO2 emissions reduction. These results have been found that in the first year, actually, these benefits are what drives the consumers into the system. They see the benefits in terms of energy reduction and therefore to some degree cost. But after that, it becomes baseline. And another key consumer benefit that they identified in the following years that are not listed here is the fact of participating to the energy transition. It might sound a bit corny, if you will, but that is really something that's been driving the adoption in their community. So they go into the community, they explain the benefits, they show the need of the system, and that is then really a key factor in contributing to the uptake that they're seeing. The key to installation here is trust. They need to be sure that people are comfortable and understand the solution, understand the benefit, and really see that as a solution they're interested and comfortable with. And also a key point is, again, the fact that there is no cost, it's free, and that is only possible because of the markets. And even then, there are some bottlenecks still in France in terms of the revenue sharing and how it works. That means that at some point, it's even sometimes difficult for aggregators to break even on their participation in the markets, which makes the rollout of further projects more difficult. So it's also about, we have to have access to the market, but we also have to have access to the market in a financial sense, and have a business case for aggregators to fully load in, because Voltalis is already big and huge and has aggregation of, I was told about a small nuclear power plant, but of course there's much more potential, and they want to grow and they're going to grow further. But also we have to have those conditions in place, because they found that citizens will not, or at least will really be reluctant to pay for the services. They want an installation box for free. And for that to happen, we really need to have the business case on the market side. I don't know what the time is, so I'm going to move a bit faster. Here we're moving to, still in France, but in the social housing example. So this has the added benefits of the of having of creating more affordable housing for people that are in need, which is also a key priority of everyone here, I'm sure, and in the EU. This is a partnership between Elax Energy, so Delphine that you saw earlier in the round table, and REVP, which is a major French social landlord with about 75,000 homes. So they started that with a pilot project of 20 units in 2022, and now they've reached way massive scale of 16,000 homes and 22,000 homes signed. So there's still some installation going on. So all of that is on multi-family social housing buildings. And the way Elax Energy operates, I'm sure that was explained earlier, but they focus on electric water heater and provide flexibility on that, and use the aggregation of all these 22,000 homes, or 16,000 at the moment, to provide flexibility on the market and be remunerated that way as well. So for the results here in that pretty large projects, what we see is tenants see a 26% reduction in their consumption for the water heating, because when you become smart in the way you heat, you also consume less, because you don't always need to be heating your water, with zero impact on their comfort, which leads to their reduction of their bills, about 70 to 100 euros a year per household. And by being less consuming, you also expand the lifespan of your electric water heater by about 4 years, which is pretty impressive. For the landlord, that's a benefit also in terms of maintenance, because Elax provides also predictive maintenance of the assets. So that reduces their cost by 700,000 a year. And it also leads to the fact that their services are paid back generally within the year, which makes really the solution kind of a no-brainer and an easy change for them. For the grids, this project has provided about 32 megawatts of dispatchable load and active load shifting. So they participate in frequency regulation, balancing mechanisms, but also the wholesale markets, and really provides flexibility throughout the different needs of the electricity system. Here again, in terms of lessons learned, trust drives scales again. Trust is a massive element, so total transparency is needed. On-the-ground action, customer care, being in the community is an important part of ensuring that's picked up and the roll-up continues. And also here key is flexibility is not the means, not the product. We tend to see in the flexibility space, we talk about flexibility as if it was the end-all be-all, but for consumers, really the key is what they get out of it, which is, in this case, guaranteed comfort, lower bills, guaranteed performance, predictive maintenance. All that is provided because Elax provides it and is able to be remunerated on the market. So embedding your products in the local community and making sure that they serve the need of the consumers has really been key to ensuring that they are rolled out effectively instead of just being a pilot project somewhere. We had many more. I just wanted to mention a few just so that you see them here. We had many more case studies, but we didn't have time to cover them all. So it really shows there's a lot of projects being developed everywhere. And we'd be happy to share that with you, the Commission, in written form later on with all the case studies we've had, but just so you know. Very quickly wrapping up here, for me, key takeaway is this: residential flexibility is real. It's a win-win. It benefits for the grids, it benefits the consumers, it even benefits the aggregators when it's flexible, explicit flexibility. It's a fundamental element of the transition. Projects are already happening on the ground, full scale, not pilots, and they're providing these benefits now. The good thing is that easily scaled up as well. You can, all the projects I've talked to have been very clear that this is a solution they could expand very much further. And it's just a matter of point number 3, which is the right policy framework and the right market cases. If we have that, the markets will grow, the industry will grow, enrollment clearly is going with it. It's just a matter of unlocking the reds from the first map into greens and making sure that the conditions for the market make sense from a business case perspective for the aggregators. Final point, flexibility is enabler of electrification. So here, just putting it here, it's an example from the UK, but still pretty demonstrative, I think. This is the cost of a gas boiler, the operating cost of a gas boiler compared to a heat pump. You'll see that a gas boiler is slightly cheaper. That is an obstacle for homeowners. But if you apply flexibility to it, that cost goes way down and it becomes more cheaper than a gas boiler. And this is an essential part of what I'm trying to drive here is flexibility reduces cost and therefore lowers the barrier to entry for electrification for consumers. So when we talk about renovations, we talk about installing those capability, but it's also about making sure that we have the enablers in place so that it becomes attractive and it makes sense to the consumers. So a small recommendation when we're talking about electrification in buildings, maybe electrification action plan, for example, demand-side flexibility should be seen not only as a complementary measure, but really as an enabler of the electrification for consumers. And with that, I will leave you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marek, for this overview and the many good examples that you highlighted. There is one question in the chat for you, which I think refers to the first example you gave of Voltalis, where the question is whether there was a reduction of CO2 emissions, I think 70% off the top of my head. And given that this is very much focused on electric water heaters and the nuclear share in France, how do you account for that number?
I was muted. That's a great question. I personally do not have the details, but I know Eleanor from Voltalis is in the call, and potentially, if you're interested, we can put you in contact with her, and she could provide more information. This is not sadly a data I have on top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries. I mean, you mentioned that on one of your last slides that scaling up is easy. That's what I took from it. I mean, how do you? I mean, what makes you so confident that it's easy, and why is it then not happening already?
So I'm confident. I would say I'm optimistic. Why I'm confident it's easy is because when we see the projects actually being rolled out, you see that the adoption rate is there. So you see that people are interested in that product and really take it up when it makes sense for them and when it's available. And now why it's not being rolled out, I think we can talk about the policy environment and the conditions. In many countries, explicit flexibility is almost impossible to access, for example, wholesale markets, which makes it very difficult for aggregators to get their revenue. In others, the dynamic pricing of electricity is still not yet widespread. It's coming more and more, but it's not still fully in place. What we also see, even in France, when we have that explicit market available, is if the way it's set up requires a revenue sharing that doesn't make sense for the aggregator to function, then they can't expand more than they have. I was talking to several members. I was saying we have this business case. It works. We have deployed it in such and such places. We want to do more, but it's difficult to make financial sense for us based on that revenue sharing. So it's about finding the conditions that allow them to do so. They're already deploying as much as they can, and they want to. They talk about terawatt hours of flexibility being provided. They just need that conditions to be unlocked, and EU law is doing a lot on that. But implementation has been lagging, so we're having issues with in terms of practicality on the ground, having the conditions needed for flexibility to be activated.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I saw Eleanor sort of raising your hand and then lowering your hand?
Uh,
I don't know if you want to come in. Doesn't look like it.
She can't unmute.
I can't unmute. Okay.
If
Maybe we
raise
can unmute you. Yeah.
to raise the hand so that we can.
Can you? There you are.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much for the morning altogether. It's really fascinating. In terms of carbon emissions, the rationale is that when prices are high, it's usually because there's a lot of carbon intensive means of production. So when we curtail demand during these carbon intensive moments, actually the whole grid lowers its carbon emissions.
Okay.
I replied a bit in the thread as well. For those also aggregators who do demand increase, if you push the demand for when there's lots of renewables, you also have an impact on carbon emissions as a whole, provided that this is consumption displacement rather than pure demand creation.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have come to the end of this second session of best practices. So Peter and Marek, again, thank you very much for your contributions. Please stay with us if you can, because we are now going to move into the open session of the workshop, which is where we are going to engage, hopefully with many of you, on a couple of key questions that from our side would be interesting, sort of building on what we have already heard today. And I'm letting people tables in front of me. Okay. No. And so the first sort of block of issues is sort of building a little bit on what we already heard, which are many examples of flexibility and the role of buildings and assets and buildings in this context. But for the people online, I mean, if there are any other examples that you are aware of, and things that maybe do things slightly differently from what we have already heard, it would be interesting for us to learn about them. Also, in terms of your experiences, when it comes to, well, has it been easy to set up? What have been the barriers, and what can we potentially do to scale this up? So, I mean, the floor is open. Please raise your hand if you want to come in, and then I will give you the floor, and then you can introduce yourself, and we are off. So, you rate the top of the list of participants. Oh, there was a hand up and then down. Don't be shy. It's back up, Irene.
But let me start the video if it works. I don't know. I will try. Hi. Thanks very much for this session. It has been extremely useful and inspiring, I have to say. My name is Irene Skula. I'm from C40 Cities. I'm the Director of Energy and Buildings. C40 Cities is a global network of nearly 100 cities over the world. I wanted to make two very quick contributions to this discussion, and we heard it a lot, about creating trust with customers and citizens for these programs to succeed. So in my point of view, the role of local authorities is crucial in this discussion. Being the level of government closest to the citizens, and we work very fruitfully also with the European Commission at multiple levels, it's key to bring them in. It's key to bring citizens the discussion to create the right circumstances for demand-side flexibility, working with their citizens on this front. And we also heard that flexibility enables electrification, and I would say electrification also enables flexibility. So we're going back to where we started. For this to happen, we need to renovate the buildings. And for renovating the buildings and allowing for electrification, we need to create, obviously, the right frameworks for the citizens to be part of this transition. And also where we started, we talked about the affordable housing plan. I think we need to link all this in one circle. We need housing affordability, we need renovations, and we need great demand side flexibility for all the reasons we heard. This is one thing, this is one system. So we need to remember that we need to accelerate the renovations, use the power of local authorities into this transition, which will also create trust at the right level. I also shared the example from London. I think some of the participants have picked it up, where we assessed the demand side flexibility of such a big city, not in the EU, and it was up to 8 gigawatts. That's huge. That's a huge number of demand side flexibility potential. I can assure you other EU cities have similar levels of flexibility potential. So my intervention is we need to bring more cities in and highlight the role of the cities in this transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's sort of tying into what was already said earlier, the role of the consumer in terms of building trust, well, maybe not overly complicating life for consumers. And you're pointing to the important role that local authorities, cities can play in that context. So that they can bring some of this together at least at local level. That's what I'm hearing. Thank you very much. Are there any other interventions? Does anybody else wants to come in? Yes, I have Gus from EUBAC.
Sorry, it took a second to enable the cameras and give the permissions. Thank you so much as well for organizing this very topical discussion and bringing us all together to provide some inputs. So my name is Gus Kosovic, the Managing Director at EUBAC, the European Building Automation Controls Association. And from EUBAC's side, I'd just like to quickly highlight 2 main points I'd like this discussion not to overlook. So when we talk about capacities, equipments, and grids, first, the business case and the comfort case both need to work side by side. So for building owners, flexibility must be rewarded, of course, as was already discussed today. And that means both on the tariff structure side and the value peak reduction and flexibility capacity, not only the total kilowatt hours, but at the same time, flexibility must remain bounded by some sort of comfort and indoor environmental quality guidelines that we can all follow. So the message cannot be, I think, that occupants should accept worse comfort for the sake of the grid. And the right message is that with the right controls, flexibility is intelligent scheduling within these indoor environmental quality limits. And second, I just want to underline that building automation control systems can be an enabling layer here, because the flexibility, no matter how we design the grid, in the building cannot happen manually. So it needs connected equipment. It needs systems that can connect heating, cooling, ventilation, EV charging, everything else that was discussed today. So this is why we think and try to always remind us that there are already existing requirements at the European level. So the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive provisions for smart buildings, and they should be seen not only as an energy efficiency requirement, but also as part of the Europe's flexibility infrastructure. So full and practical implementation of these provisions at the national level is really essential and critical for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for pointing out the importance of implementing some of the legislation that we agreed over the last years. Earlier in the chat, there was also something making reference to the EPBD and the role it can play in terms of driving flexibility, because there are some provisions there. So that's very good, and indeed making sure that the comfort angle is not forgotten there. Peter. I see.
So now I think you can hear me also.
Yes.
Yeah, I think my comment relates quite much to Gust's comment already, but I also want to highlight that, I mean, we see that I think the customer need to have also a long-term belief in the market incentives. So I mean, if you see a market arise, for instance, on the ancillary services, and then it matures very quick, and the potential disappears, so to say, then it's up to us as aggregators and service providers to show that there are also a long-term potential for participation. And I think that long-term potential for participation is also very governed about how policy and regulation and tariffs are structured moving forward. So that's really my message to you guys that work on that level, to make sure that we have the right incentives for creating flexibility on the market, the whole value chain. And also classification of maybe different energy assets based on their purpose. So, for instance, not implementing low tariffs that creates or actually create bottlenecks in terms of participation with down regulation when that is needed from a system level and not a burden for the system level. So really create the right playground to have this sort of integration and flexibility end to end from system level down to the individual asset and customer. And it can be done, but we need to work further on that, is my view.
Thank you. And when you say you guys have to work on that, do you have any particular actor in mind?
No, but I think all I mean, governmental bodies, policymakers, and so forth need to take the whole perspective into account and really understanding how can we incentivize flexibility. I think I don't remember if it was Marcia or who mentioned that earlier, but I think that is really crucial, and not just putting the money towards actually capex investment in grid fortification, but also using the money wise in terms of enabling other mechanisms, not to replace those, but to support those. As we see in Utrecht, for instance, or in Netherlands, how can we really create means to utilize existing capacity infrastructure in a greater way and put those efforts into the regulation on grid level.
Okay, thank you. I have Eleonore.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to say that there's an opportunity here to ensure fairness, to reach people. We've talked a lot of cities, but also reaching people who are in the countryside, so independent of the location, across a wide range of social professional categories and age groups. And for that, because some categories are more likely to invest than others, we need a whole range of business models to be able to be developed if we want to reach everyone, not leaving anyone behind. So building systems that work for the connected households, but also for those who are not connected. And I'm thinking in terms of benefits, because we've also talked of benefits, but there's, of course, individual benefits, but there's also collective benefits. Those collective benefits are not necessarily, in the UK, we know what these are. The numbers have been crunched by the UK government. This is not done in many European countries. There's an assessment often of the amount, the capacities that we need, but it's very rare to see countries that assess the utilization that they need and the benefits that this could bring. And also taking into account that business cases need to stack up for investors as well. Thank you.
So do you see, what role do you see there for example, do you think this should happen at member state level? Do you see there's a role for the European Commission, for example, in doing work in this area?
Yes, pretty much. To quantify to what extent, the extent to which demand side response flexibility should be used. At one point in the UK, for example, the House of Lords was talking of 20% of consumption that needs to be flexed. To have capacities is very helpful. To have utilization is even more helpful because it gives you the size of the challenge.
Okay, thank you. I mean, yeah, I would sort of expect that that is already there. I mean, I'm maybe also looking at Smart N, who are, of course, very aware of what's happening in the various member states on flexibility. But maybe not. I mean, so not. Okay, thank you very much. Next on my list is Tyke.
Hi. Sorry, thanks very much to everybody for the very interesting presentations, discussion. Just to let you know, I'm the deputy head of unit in a sister unit of Roberts, and we in the consumers unit. With the background to my question, I've got a series of ones, and I think one question is, and I think it sort of goes to everybody, but maybe Octopus was the most obvious. The things between it is with the nice table, but what are the relative benefits of selling flexibility from the wholesale markets, which was green in several member states, versus the network benefits, where you're selling it to the network operators? Because although they interact with each other, they are still essentially separate markets. And I'm very interested to understand which can serve as the starter market or the push market. In other words, if you can push with the wholesale market and the intraday flexibility before you start rolling out the full flexibility also for the networks. And I fully understand there's interactions between how they work in reality, but that's the first question. The second question I have here is, well, we saw a lot of individual projects, ideas, systems here from different member states. Some people are operating in several member states. What I'm interested to understand is, what are the costs of localization? So we know that you have to get different systems for interfacing with DSOs, with retail markets, with that. We see limited cross-border activity in retail markets, which I mean suppliers operating in multiple markets. We have exceptions, I know, including ones here. So I want to know is, what are the localization costs? In the very, very nitty-gritty detailed things, how much is the cost? And I'll just throw out here, I know Octopus is participating in very large markets, but we don't see anybody saying, yes, I moved from Lithuania to Ireland to Slovenia, and therefore have we got an issue of minimum market scale? And by the way, for Octopus, I don't think you operate in Northern Ireland, which is a separate market, but I could be wrong here. So I want to get some sense of what are the benefits of harmonization at European level for addressing these localization issues. And third question, I'm sorry for throwing out questions here, but they're very relevant, which is I'm interested in what people think about. We see that we have short-term issues. We say that let's not, we need to have flexibility in the medium term, but we also have very, very, very current issues in some member states dealing with flexibility. So, and the need to be able to connect new generation, new consumption in any particular area. So what is the trade-off then between maybe having flexibility in the short term and still needing to have major investments and potentially oversized investments? Because I hope that when we build a new distribution system of actually putting wire in the ground, we build one that's going to do us for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and not one that solves the problem for 5 years. And that's slightly related to the issue as well, that there's a faster depreciation time on software than there is on hardware. So how do we look at that? And then finally, one question, and I really think this is the big one. We do all these things, but how confident are we outside of studies that consumers will respond? Because there's a lot, we do pilots and we see people respond, but I also know that we have seen lots of, and I think this is more about what's best practice here, where we do, for example, time of use network tariffs, where in reality people are consuming the same. It's just too complex, it's too hard, and they don't make any changes. So all we've done is make their lives a little bit more complicated, but not actually gotten the response we want. Okay, so that's 4 questions. I should only have had 3, but I throw them out, and I think it goes to many of the people who are speaking today. And I think the answers you give will be very informative for us as we think more.
Thank you very much, Dyke. I mean, that almost requires a separate workshop. I see.
Had a technical failure there. Tadek, they were great questions and actually go right to the heart of the issue. And I'm going to answer in reverse order, which is, do customers respond? There's a resounding yes. Both the customers who respond on a manual basis, and we're regularly getting customers to provide 100 megawatts of response in UK markets at the moment. Markets right now are really tight because of air conditioning loads across Europe. So consumers respond both on a manual basis, but they also respond via their devices. And we need to enable both those forms of flex. But it's beholden on us as suppliers and the wider market as suppliers and aggregators to make propositions for customers that are really simple to understand and make their lives easy. And that's why you need competitive markets, because competition drives that, drives the innovation and drives the effective customer proposition. Then the next point you made was around short-term problems and longer-term investments in grids. And again, I'm going to go counter to the current narrative. So the current narrative says the energy transition is so important, we will do what it takes and we will spend what it takes to build out grids. And actually, I'm going to say the energy transition is so important, we need to make electricity really cheap. And we need to do whatever it takes to make electricity as cheap. And actually, given what's happening in terms of batteries, which are direct substitutes for grids, we need to be really careful about saying we need more load-related expenditure. Now, there will be, I'm not saying you can replace all of the load-related expenditure with batteries, but I think you need to have a really cold, hard economic look at what you can displace, because grid cost, I was talking to one of the German TSOs on Friday, and so, you know, the BNetzA would presumably have this data, but they said the cost of a kilometre of transmission had gone up 500%. Now, the costs of batteries are declining year on year. The second point you made was around localization. And I think there are huge costs. And I think we, you know, the network code for demand response was that one mechanism the EU could have used to say, look, electrons behave the same way across Europe. If you look at all the DSO flex markets across Europe, the independent market platforms, they all have standard products. You should therefore define some standard products in the network code and say to DSOs, sure, you can have any product you want, but you at least need to offer 2 standard products. And you know, Octopus, we can go in and we can customize for every single country because we're big. But if you want to grow the market, you have to make the product standard. And you can see that happening at TSO level. You can see Marie and Picasso, you know, we're creating standard products, we're using them standard ways, and we need absolutely to do the same thing, particularly at DSO level where there are not flexibility markets in existence. So let's standardize the markets before they are created, rather than letting the 2,500 DSOs create their own sweet thing. And then your last comment was around anchor markets. And wholesale markets are absolutely critical. So again, opening markets for aggregators to enable them to get the wholesale benefit is really important. But the different value from different markets is really dependent on the member state. So if you think about France, you have a very thermosensitive network. So you only get a few days of the year when the network is really running at peak because of the resistive heating load. So flexibility at DSO level is much less valuable, if you like, compared to a network where you've got much less room, or where you've got a high percentage of EVs. So the relative weight across different markets will vary by member state, but across all of them, you need to open up the wholesale market part of it. And if you remember back to Nigel's graph, you can see those real peaks, and driving gas off those really expensive peaks will bring down electricity prices for everyone.
Thank you very much, Marcia, for that answer. I was afraid I had to answer Tijk's questions, which I'm quite happy I haven't. But we're very keen, of course, indeed, to learn from your experiences out there in the real world. So if anybody else wants to come in on the questions that Tijk raised, please do. But next on my list, I have John.
Okay, I think you mean me, Robert John Taylor.
I do indeed.
All right, thank you very much, Robert. I'll just introduce myself first of all. John Taylor, and I represent Liquid Gas Europe. So it's clear that I'm going to be talking just a very little bit about gas, particularly renewable liquid gas. I apologize. Well, I don't apologize for that, actually, because I don't think it's been talked about enough. Okay, but before I tell you that, I'll also tell you that for more than 20 years, I've been working in building energy efficiency performance, predominantly in the UK, but also in other countries in the EU. So I'm very interested in all these presentations. I thought it was fascinating. I know quite a bit about some of these technologies and some of the projects. I also know about other projects, which I think the moderator in the first session, John Ferris, will also know about a project called the Freedom Project, which was run in the UK, where gas hybrid heating systems were evaluated. I think it was in Wales. So it might be interesting to hear from John about that project. And essentially, what I want to say is, I'm surprised that there's been very little mention of gas. And I'm not talking about fossil gas. I'm certainly not promoting fossil gas at all. I'm promoting renewable gas, renewable liquid gas in the case of Liquid Gas Europe, but renewable gas generally. And I think renewable gas, okay, I think we have a situation, and one of the respondents to the question I asked earlier said about we want to reduce gas. And of course, we all want to reduce energy consumption. It makes sense. I think we need to be careful we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, so fossil gas, yes, we need to reduce, but renewable gas, we need to take advantage of it. And we need to take advantage of it to provide the flexibility that we've all been talking about. So I'm a bit surprised about that. Maybe someone can tell me and sort me out. Well, that's good. I'm happy to be any responses. But my simple question is, do you, this is DG Energy, and also the other contributors to this workshop, do you see a role for renewable gas? If there is enough of it, and if it's at the right price. Thank you very much, Robert, for that opportunity.
Thank you. Yes, interesting question, of course. I mean, I think, and I don't want to give you the sort of definitive answer on behalf of DG Energy, because I can really not represent DG Energy on these questions, given that they fall slightly out of scope of my day-to-day responsibilities. But I would fully agree with you that we want to get rid of fossil, in particular fossil imported gas, but fossil gas in general. I mean, that's a stated objective of energy policy in the EU, underlined by the recent price increases and what we've seen as a result of the Ukraine war as well. And when it comes to renewable gases, I think there one of the questions that I would, from my perspective, would have there. Well, we also have to look at the efficiency of that. So it's clear that if there is abundant renewables and it would otherwise be curtailed or wasted, and that can be used to develop renewable gases, whether that's hydrogen or other things, then I would say why not? And they can definitely contribute to the stability of our energy system and even sort of help in the energy transition. So I think that's fine. But we need to be super careful that we don't sort of direct, as it were, or investments, for example, or other things in an overproduction of that. So there is a need to take it into account in a system energy perspective. So and that would be sort of my sort of immediate answer. And it goes a bit beyond the scope of this particular workshop to go into further details there. But there is no crusade against renewable gas from the DG Energy or the European Commission in general, I would say.
Okay, thank you for that, Robert.
Cheers. I have next on my list Sebastian.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I'm with Techem. We do energy management services, and in Germany alone, we're also part of the smart meter rollout. And that's why I would like to take the opportunity to contribute here as well, as we also support more competitive markets in the EU. The internal energy market isn't as competitive as it looks on the paper. So maybe you could also have a look on that one. And regarding the smart meter terminology, I would like to highlight that there are varying levels of functionality in the market at the moment, and the term smart meter is used for everyone as a global term. And as a consequence, quantitative comparisons of deployment rates are limited of value because it's different systems. Furthermore, this equivalence may lead to preference for simpler, lower cost systems without control capabilities that we need regarding the grid performance, particularly when it comes to the integration of renewable energy and demand side flexibility. And as a result, some EU countries may require a further phase of rollout to ensure that metering systems are capable of supporting advanced use cases. And it may be therefore useful to consider distinguishing between smart meters and, for example, intelligent metering systems that allow for advanced functionalities. And this would also help to guide investments to grid supportive solutions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I was hoping Taike was still in the meeting because he could then answer some of your questions, I think. Yeah, I mean, on your last point on smart meters, I'm clear that's an important element. We are doing quite a bit of work. Our colleagues in particular are doing quite a lot of work on smart meter rollout, on supporting member states there, and also on the sort of the underlying standardization that comes with it in order to avoid that. You know, what is a smart meter in one place might be very different in another place. On the competitiveness of energy markets, I'm really not in a position to comment sensibly on that. So I will park that and maybe leave it for other colleagues if they want to come in on that. Okay. Okay, so we are sort of having a bit of a mix of comments around what already works. I see a question or a comment in the chat which is linked to stricter regulation. I mean, somebody making the reference to the EPBD and that the requirements or the provisions in the EPBD surrounding demand response are maybe not strict enough, and that sort of, in my mind, poses the question: well, where does the balance lie? I mean, we after the EPBD in particular was adopted, we had a lot of pushback from various areas around elements of the EPBD, that it's too complicated, that it is maybe driving cost. But on the other hand, we of course also see that the EPBD can help very much to address issues around flexibility, that we have the smart readiness indicator, we have requirements around that buildings should sort of become more flexible, ready. There are provisions on building automation and control systems. So, I mean, the question out there is a little bit, well, does the answer, simplistically put, lie in more regulation or stricter regulation, or does the answer lie, no, it's really the markets, and we need to create or support the right business models for things like flexibility to take off. So that's a question I'm putting out there. I'm not seeing for the time being anybody else raising their hands, but I'm happy to be patient. If markets were open, indeed. But okay, picking up on that, Marcia, if markets were open, they are apparently not open. Is there a regulatory response to that? Or is this, where does the answer lie there?
A bit slow. It is really interesting operating across Europe because we have the opportunity to talk to a range of different TSOs and DSOs, and I think you're able to see different approaches to running electricity systems. So in Spain, domestic consumers can't export from the battery, and that's a really useful thing if you want to support the grid. You can't use consumer flexibility in the redispatch market unless you have real-time metering. So sometimes markets are technically open, but not functionally open. And so the economics means you effectively can't participate. So a clearer example is the capacity markets. So across Europe, they are markets just for turning down at peak, essentially. In Spain, you need real-time metering. Another example is MFRR, so a 15-minute product to do turn down or turn up. In Belgium, Alia says, look, we can use the boundary meter. And that's really sensible because these are, they're compliant with the metering directive, they're accurate, and they're there already. Whereas many other markets require you to install expensive, more granular metering. And so I think, one, getting TSOs together and saying, what do you really need to run the system? And why do you need real-time metering in Spain, but you can use a smart meter in Belgium would be good. Why DSO markets in, and you can do exactly the same process across all of those key markets. Why is there so much variability given that electrons behave the same way? Ireland probably has, Ireland and Spain and some of these member states that have small connections to the synchronous grid and therefore tend to have less sort of inertia on the system. There is a case for separate requirements from grid operators. But, let's be clear about what the physics says, and then let's make sure the markets reflect the physics. Because if markets were open and if DSOs and TSOs were incentivized to use flexibility, it would happen. You wouldn't need regulation. What's happening is we're using regulation because we haven't set up the system properly.
Thank you very much. I see applause from Simon, who has been vocal in the chat also, and has been asking questions about the Irish situation and why it would or would not work there. So it's a difficult question, and your answer is also a bit sort of balancing these two elements. Well, we wouldn't need regulations if markets are open, but markets are open, and in order to make them open, we might need a bit more regulation or a bit more harmonization, or I don't know what the evidence-based policy making. Yeah, well, that's what we're doing, of course. Okay, very, very good. I mean, of course, if people want to come in on this particular discussion, then they are welcome. And I'm also seeing some comments in the chat, but Eleonore, maybe to pick up on this.
Thank you. I totally agree with what Marcia has just said. That's also our experience. I would like to add also that the ability to use DMDs, behind the meter devices, is also critical. Not all countries have got a full rollout of smart meters, so we need also solutions to work when there's not enough smart metering. The second point I wanted to highlight is also the data, access to data, and also how we connect to markets. For example, in some countries, there's multiple DNOs. We have to have one API or one communication system with all of them, and then several communication systems with the TSO. And then on top, we've got communication systems with the wholesale market. And that's for each individual country. So to have systems where, I'm not saying we can connect to all the countries together, although that'd be an ideal, but systems where, at least at country level, we've got one type of data feed for each market and not one for each market operator would be very helpful also and would help greatly with stackability.
Thank you very much. And Matti.
So yes, I'm Matti Rae and a private EU consultant from Finland and been following this discussion. And I was the one that asked for the stricter regulation on the EPBD, but I completely agree with Maisha on the point that if the markets would work, there would not be a need for the regulation. But as the electrical system is a system from the beginning to the end, and in order to make it happen, it's actually the rules that started when Westinghouse and Edison started experimenting with electricity. It's not gone out of fashion. It needs to be in balance every millisecond. So this requirement should be applied to everybody along the grid, from the production to the consumption, and everybody should be participating in this endeavor on making it balanced. And I just wonder, why are we still allowing buildings to be constructed without a compulsory DSR? Because we are not creating the future that we need. We are just creating more problems. Some buildings that need to be retrofitted in order to be compatible with the future system, which we all know where is it leading to. So I think that in order to make this happen, this discussion should be joined by all the parties in the electrical system. And but thank you. It's been a very fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, yes. Well, the next time we are negotiating the EPBD, I will invite you to come to the room, and we'll see how these discussions go. I mean, I don't think we disagree with the need for addressing this a bit more firmly. Picking up also on the comment from Gus in the chat around the importance that EPBD is being fully implemented, and at least from that side, let's say, creates the boundary conditions for flexibility also to take off there. I take the point on interoperability that's being raised. I think we're doing quite a bit of work on that in the data for energy context also. So there is a bit of work ongoing, but I also have the impression there is still a sort of a disconnect between sort of, if I can sort of say, this lower level work on exchange of data and exchange of and the ability of appliances to react to signals and whatever in a harmonized or standardized way, and on the other hand, how that connects to the market that is out there or is not out there, and that we're still sort of missing a trick there, which I would be very keen to see how we can overcome some of the existing barriers still there.
If I'm
Did I see?
still
Yeah,
allowed.
so I did see some. Yeah, sorry, Matti, you want to come back?
Yeah, just a short comment. I've been dreaming of this kind of a USB of DSR. You standardize the USB-C connection to every device. It would be just wonderful to have this kind of a USB-C of DSR all over Europe. So this is just an idea. I don't know whether we will see this, but let's work together to get this this happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia.
So just building on Matti's comments and a number of the comments in the chat, interoperability, particularly of the assets that we are busily installing and buying across the EU, is really fundamental. And I think you're beginning to see standardization in terms of communication protocols with chargers. So Matti, you've got your USB for chargers in terms of OCPP, but you need each asset class to have a clear interoperable standard. And currently, lots of EVs are being sold without any open API. There is no standard API out there for EVs. And given it is the fastest growing asset class, it is a real challenge. And it will end up with cars being controlled via the charger, which will also require implementation of another standard. So competition is good. Interoperability helps competition. And it's something that we really need to be supporting. So Matti, I love your USB image for demand. Sorry, I'll put a link to the chat in terms of the Mercury Consortium, which is not defining standards, but which is bringing together, Nigel's way ahead of me, is bringing together people from across the entire energy chain, because you need the TSOs and the DSOs to say what they need from flexibility products. You need the equipment manufacturers to design the products that can work in those markets. You need the aggregators and suppliers to be able to communicate. You need markets that have standard interfaces. So it's a sort of full-length chain. So Mercury is a not-for-profit. It's a global initiative. It would be one of those helpful things.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was new to me, but I'm sure colleagues working on data and interoperability are aware of that. I very much hope they are. So, I mean, one of the questions that we are, of course, sort of looking at, and it's building a little bit on this discussion, is, well, who should act on this? I mean, and it's for us also very important. I mean, you can imagine, I mean, we would love to be able to work at all levels, and local and regional and national, in order to try and get everybody on the same page and align, as it were, actors. But we are not able to, and for all kinds of reasons, not only because of limited resources, but also because of subsidiarity. So one of the questions we would have is, well, where should Europe intervene, if I can say so, or support, or play a major role, and where would member states, and whether that's governments or regulators or even other actors like DSOs take the lead on overcoming some of these barriers that have been raised today. That's a question out there. We're very much interested in that question. Why? Because we're also looking in the context of the Better Homes partnerships to see where we can really look at practical problems and overcoming practical barriers and scaling that up. So anybody who has any illuminating thoughts about that's very welcome. I see, Marcia, you still have your hand up, so you want to come in?
So I was going to provide a suggestion for 4 things that could be done at EU level, but you might want to, there's a couple more people. I've already done a lot of talking, so why don't we let some other people talk?
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, okay. Well, I see now indeed that the list is not always showing the people upstairs, higher up on my screen. So, Philippe.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for these very interesting exchanges. I'm part from GRDF, French gas DSO. We are very much involved in biomethane development. And for years now, we're considering the value of flexibility. And one thing I would like to share with you, for me, in building flexibility can work on two value streams from a system perspective. The first one is to optimize renewable electricity. That can be done easily with heat storage batteries, perfect tool for that. The other one is to optimize the electric grids, the infrastructure. And infrastructure, how do you size infrastructure? Is for extreme events. And extreme event, if you consider the world energy demand, is space heating. As a more demanding demand is a cold snap together with a Dunker filter. And we know that because the gas infrastructure has been sized for that. So, so there's two value streams. I think it's important to make the difference between the two of them because we're not touching exactly the same tools. And they don't have to be opposed. I think we are convinced that they need to be combined. And to manage this peak optimization, I think to take a system perspective where we can combine energy infrastructure, mostly locally where the demand will be, but then within the electric system, the heat system, and the gas system will help optimizing the more cost for consumers. And I think that the EED set a key tool for that is a local heating and cooling plants. And I think we may add on that, in addition to that system perspective, to try to build in some resilience by design in it. Because sometimes we lose of view crisis, energy crisis have been changing for the last decades. We see we have higher climatic events. We have more geopolitical uncertainties. I think whenever other homeowner want to have my solar panels, my batteries, I can feel safe that can charge I can have my dedicated demand covered. But if I want to have a warm house in cold days, but my battery won't be enough. So that's where combining that with a hybrid system can be interesting. I think we have to change the way we consider the world system. And instead of opposing energies, see how we can combine them at best. And that will be my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's indeed important. This sort of system view and balancing the various energy kits, if I can say so. I'm looking at whether other colleagues want to come in. I just want to pick up maybe then on one of the comments in the chat, which has to do with, again, with DPPD and the provisions in DPPD for what is called the Smart Readiness Indicator. And that has a component that focuses on flexibility of buildings. The current status there is that we have a number of pilot projects running with member states where they are piloting, testing the SRI methodology. We are slowly but surely receiving inputs from them on the results of those pilot exercises. And that will result in a report that we as the Commission have to do under the DPPD of this testing phase. And on the back of the results, we will then have or have not, depending a little bit on what the outcome is, take that particular work forward. So we're still very much looking at that as one of the tools that we have in order to push more flexibility and demand response readiness of buildings in Europe. Yeah, that report will hopefully come out before the end of the year, and then we will take that debate forward also in that context. In the meantime, we will of course start checking transposition of DPPD across the whole range of the provisions that are there, including those provisions that are more directly relevant for the discussion that we're having today. I'm looking again whether there are people that want to raise their hands. I don't see anybody. So, Marcia, I'm back to you for your 4-point action plan for us to solve the problem.
So for me, the 4 things are standard flexibility products in the network code for demand response. And so that's thinking it and, thinking broadly about that. So ensuring that DSOs and TSOs have standard products, that they harmonize the requirements, and this will take a little while, but I have been talking, for instance, with TSOs who say that they are already talking amongst themselves around how to harmonize MFRR, for instance. So, Draghi talked about the need for harmonization across Europe. Let's not institutionalize 27 different member states. The second thing that's really key is incentivize DSOs. And that's because DSOs act as the gatekeeper for building level flexibility. They act as the gatekeeper between themselves and the rest of the energy system. And they need to be really incentivized to use flexibility, and they need to make money for their shareholders or for their governments by using it. And this is a huge cultural change. And then I loved Matty's comment about a USB for flexibility, and that's absolutely key. And I said, you could see that happening in EV chargers, but we need a standard API for EVs, another one for heat pumps, another one for batteries. And then lastly, we need electricity markets to be technically and functionally or effectively open to flexibility. And I'm happy to provide much more detail on that, but we still have this huge spectrum across Europe where some TSOs like Alia and Transnet are really focused on harnessing flexibility to drive down costs for consumers and businesses, and others are still caught in an old-fashioned way of running systems, and we need to change that.
Thank you very much. I'm reading in the meantime Simon's comments. I mean, Simon, you've been very active in the chat. Do you want to maybe come in with some of your reflections?
In Ireland, we have the highest electricity prices in Europe, and we have lots of innovation apparently going on, but none of it is aimed at the consumer. The only thing we experience as consumers is increased prices. We're told that our grid is incredibly advanced and incredibly secure for a little island off the coast of Europe, and that may be the case, but there's very little innovation evident at the consumer level, and certainly the buildings are completely excluded from the discussion in terms of flexibility. So we've a lot to do there.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that is a sentiment that we also sometimes feel here. I think that I mean, one of the reasons of hosting this workshop is to actually try and sort of bring buildings more central to this debate, even though, also picking up on Marcia's comments, I mean, the issue is wider and is more systemic, if I can say so, rather than it is sort of, a building by building approach. But it's clear that these worlds have to meet somewhere in the middle. That's been very useful. And I'm still, of course, very happy to take comments or questions. I have a bit the impression that we are, of course, in a world where we're coming from a certain way of managing our energy and electricity system in particular, and we need to move to a different way. We're in that transition, and that means that some people will have to sort of move out of their comfort zones, including probably the European Commission also in terms of how it views its role in these markets and as regulator at European level at least. And that is obviously not always easy. Marcia, you want to come back in?
So it was just to sort of elaborate on my comment in the chat. So every 2 years, the JRC publishes this brilliant report called the DSO Observatory. And every 2 years, they ask the same question. But the last time they had a statistically significant number of respondents was in 2018. And they asked network operators to report on their average annual network utilization at low voltage level. And you can, for some networks, you can work it out. But it's a really important figure, and it's this sort of 10% figure. It varies globally. But that figure is really important because on the one hand, you've got a figure of 10%, and on the other hand, in places like Spain and the Netherlands, you have network operators reporting on their ability to connect new load. And they focus on that peak, that network peak. And obviously the network peak is critical and you need to know that. But knowing how much spare capacity there is absolutely critical for flexible load. And what's interesting is the state of Virginia has just brought in regulation which says that the network companies need to report on both the peak usage, but also this annual average network utilization. And this is a statistic which was developed by the World Bank in 2015. And it's really important because it reminds us that we could still do so much better job in terms of using the networks more effectively. And if we can use the networks more effectively, we can get costs down for consumers. So I'll put a link to the legislation in the chat. But just getting DSOs to publish this information would be hugely revealing. And one wonders why they no longer voluntarily respond to a question which takes 10 minutes to calculate.
Thank you. Yes, I feel a conspiracy theory coming up. Thank you for that. That's been very useful. I still see some comments in the chat. Indeed, the Code of Conduct for Smart Appliances. I've made reference to that a couple of times, and I think it is an element. It's one of the pieces of the puzzle I think that we have to get right in order to make sure that these appliances do talk to each other or speak the same language, at least at some level. So that's work that we are, of course, continuing with. There is the data for energy that colleagues are working very hard on in the context of EV charging in particular, but also wider. We're looking at building energy management systems in order to see how they can play a role in the system. So, colleagues, in view of the time, I'm still happy if somebody wants to come in because, of course, this is an interesting debate. It's important to get a wide range of views on the table. It also shows that, I mean, we're not there yet in terms of having the answer to the questions or to the conundrum that we're facing in order to how we can really make flexibility markets take off in Europe and what the role of buildings in that context could be. But so before maybe closing, I see William with his hand up.
Yes, hello. Thank you for letting me on. William Rode. I work with the Norwegian Energy Authority. I'm also involved in eco-design requirements and have been implementing EPBD in Norway, introduced it and worked with it for 10 years. I'm also a private member in a Euroflex pilot project of utilizing the flexibility of my own electrical heating systems and electrical storage water heater. So I would like you, Robert, to go back to what you introduced in the beginning of the meeting. And maybe I've missed something because I had a presentation for our management. But the point that the new head of DG Energy asked you, what's in for the end consumers? Because if we have a focus on that, then we will be able to release much more flexibility. And I've seen that we, for instance, self-balancing, which is not always very transparent. It's cheaper for a wholesaler to use my resources to self-balance, to get into balance. And when I see some of the business models of the big actors here, they really want to get the consumers into their IT and smart appliances environment and make it much more difficult for them to have a free choice in the markets. And how do we ensure that there is real transparency there and that consumers don't have to invest thousands, 10,000s and even more in systems, and that get completely connected up to somebody and they don't have a choice anymore if they want to change their supplier. So, and also one of my colleagues asked me after I had installed a smart water heater, she said, how much have you saved in the last month? And there's not a figure I can get out of the system. I can get a lot of technical systems, but I can't get that out. So thank you, Octopus, for presenting zero bill houses, because I think that is a way to kind of engage the end consumers. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I mean, I think, yeah, we've heard a bit from the various best practices also that there are indeed savings also for consumers in terms of lower energy bills. But it's also clear that there is still a bit of work to be done, I think, to convince consumers that this is all in their, that it is also in their benefits and not only in the benefit of, you know, a better grid or the profits of DSOs or other actors. So that's clearly an important element. I think we've come to the end of our debate. Thank you all very much. I mean, before I conclude from our side, hoping that John is still on the call. Maybe you, John, following on from the roundtable that you moderated, but also listening to the discussion later on, what are your reflections on what you've heard?
Yes, thank you, Robert. It's been a fascinating discussion and presentations. I guess one thing that I'd really like to highlight is a comment that you just made, that we are not there yet. So recognition that we are moving in the right direction, we need to move faster. I've written down 5 points, which I think Marcia's 4 points all got a tick on my bingo card. The first one is that flexibility works, and I think that's a message that we need to make sure it's more visible. It's not just that it works, it's needed if we're going to reduce system costs and avoid overbuilding both generation and networks. That's how we're going to make electrification cheap. But the challenge, and potentially the regulatory challenge, is how do we align incentives so that that value is passed through to consumers? Which brings me on to the second point, and that is around market design. We're looking to harmonise markets across Europe, both the implementation of markets, market access to flexibility and the requirements to participate. Part of that is harmonisation of data sharing and interoperability. We don't need to wait for the Network Code on Demand response or the flexibility needs assessment. We know we need more flexibility. We need to learn, and we need to be implementing and learning from local flexibility markets. As Marcia highlighted, we can both harmonise and explore local variants at the same time. Part of this, from a regulatory perspective, is just implementing the existing rules and enforcing them. We've been talking about this since at least 2019. We should be seeing more local flexibility markets, more openness of wholesale markets for demand-side response. The third point is around inclusivity. This isn't just about new assets, new homes, although that's very important, that anything that we do add to the grid is flexible by design. We've seen moves made with the electrification of transport to develop standards. We need to support the electrification of heating, looking at building fabrics, thermal inertia, to ensure that they are flexible. And on a day like today, when I'm talking about heating, it's also cooling as well. Fourth point is that opportunity for thermal flexibility is one of the quickest ways that we can get to gigawatt scale flexibility from the demand side. And we do need to take that opportunity. And the final point is around how we make this complexity simple for consumers. We do need systems thinking, we need more coordination, partnerships, and we need to develop trust. And as I think Nigel put it, we need to offer consumers incredible propositions that are financially attractive, but low effort for the consumer.
Thank you very much, John. That made my life a lot easier because it covered, I think, quite a number of points that were also on my list of reflections on what we heard today. Again, I mean, my intent will not be to provide a sort of a full-blown summary of the discussion, which was very rich and varied, but just picking up on a number of key themes. Consumers, John, that you also highlighted, I think it's important to give consumers an offer that they can't resist, making sure that they also trust the system and don't feel that they're simply being used, let's say, for other people's ends. And in that context, transparency of information and of what they're being offered is of course very, very important. The element of comfort comes in there as well, and what I've heard is things like collective benefits versus individual benefits need to be taken into account. I heard standardization a lot coming through, whether that's in terms of markets, products and assets, exchange of data, access to data, smart meters. So elements where the Commission is already working on, but more needs to be done because it's clear that there is still quite a lot of dispersed efforts being made. I would also say that data transparency of what is happening in the market. That was raised by Marcia, but also by Eleonora around information about flexible loads, not only peak loads, and pushing, in particular, the DSOs to be more open about what is happening in their network and where the real problems lie. And then finally, something around incentives and the alignment of incentives in the value chain and in the market, so that, let's say, everybody benefits as if that is possible. And then, of course, there is the first time I heard of a magic bullet that will actually solve everything, which is a USB stick for demand response. So I'm very much hoping that we will, in the end, be able to come up with one. Then a final point from my side is to make you aware of the call for expressions of interest of the Better Homes partnerships that we published recently. I mentioned it in the beginning as one of the driving forces for us to set up this workshop in view of trying to scale up, let's say, experiences and practices that are working, where the Commission can add value to a number of areas that are linked to speeding up renovation, but flexibility of the building stock and of the existing building stock is very important there. So I hope that today's discussion has given you inspiration to have a look at the call for expressions of interest and come forward with interesting ideas. And with that, I would like to thank John and the speakers in the roundtable, the speakers in the best practice session, very much for their input and for their interesting cases. The people that intervened in the discussion, whether that was in the chat or by intervening orally, thank you very much for that. We have very much enjoyed it. It's been a rich discussion. We are going to sort of reflect on this. And of course, even if it was from 9 to 1, 4 hours are not necessarily a long time to address what is a complicated topic. So we are very keen to continue this discussion with you in the future. What shape that will take is maybe a bit early days, but I think we would be very interested to continue drawing on the expertise that's out there in the field. For example, by having a more regular workshop or seminars with experts to keep this discussion going, or by having maybe more thematic focus discussions, for example, on the role of member states or the role of regulators or the role of DSOs in this context. With that, thank you very, very much for your participation, for your time, and wishing you all a very good rest of the day wherever you are. Take care.